don't have the cameras on yet.
Okay.
That's why.
But can
do you want it to be bigger?
What?
Like everybody's faces.
Oh, I want to make sure I can be heard.
Can you hear me? There we go. You are now muted, but we should be good to go.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Cool.
Yes. Thank you. That is my excitement for the day.
There's Mama Donuts down at the reception.
Oh, I can't do
Who
donuts.
ordered those?
I don't know. It can't be for me.
We can hear you, Mayor Paula.
That's okay. Thank you. I was just declining Mama Donuts. Can't be doing donuts today.
Morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, everyone.
Morning, nice shirt, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Angela.
The same one as yesterday.
No, it's better than yesterday's shirt.
Yeah.
That made national news. My partner rang me from Dunedin saying she'd seen it down there. She asked if I need psychological support.
I was going to say that we were lucky that it was his body and not some of our other elected members' bodies. I think we got away cheaply.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
just
so.
not going to comment on that. No, no. Yeah. And they do say no publicity is bad for publicity, Jeff.
Yeah, look, I just don't know, really, to be honest.
Time will tell.
Yeah. It
It's your
didn't feel
cheapest
too good last
election
night.
campaign yet, Jeff.
It did remind me to go and watch The Hobbit again, though.
Oh, Mark.
You're a funny guy. Funny
All
guy.
right. We are a minute away from starting.
Friends like me, Jeff.
You'll keep.
We got an updated run sheet yesterday, as Councillor Ryan requested, which you have. And some key points that Sean will be alerting us to at some point. I changed my office around so I wasn't in the shadows, and now my glasses are glinty. Look at that.
I didn't know you had a flag up in your office.
I don't. This is especially for the mayor of Wuxi and the
Wow.
Chinese ambassador Asian that I'm
That's
speaking
cool.
with this morning. Yeah.
You might want to put a Ukrainian flag up there
Yeah.
and remind them that they don't want to trade with Russia.
Oh, I have got my Ukrainian pin. I could slip that on above the.
Ewan, we'll see if we can hack it into the picture so it gets on the media.
Yes.
Please don't, colleagues.
You should take the opportunity to express how important you believe it is that China doesn't get involved in helping the Russians.
Okay, right. We are now into the meeting. And good morning again, everyone. You can see we've got a number of items to get through, and before we get into the most critical conversations, which are those around the budget and finance. So we're going to start, Julie. Oh, there you are. Julie, we're going to start with which one?
The external revenue funding realignment. This, of course, is on the resolutions on page 200 of Diligent, and the detail is on page, let me just check that, the detail is on page 228. This was, just for context, Mayor Paula, this was a resolution that was passed just recently. Rebecca will talk to that. So you've had a long debate about this recently. And since the writing of the report, this resolution has been passed to do this. So we're just incorporating this into our annual plan discussion. So we make sure we're picking up the most latest decisions of council. Rebecca.
Are there any questions, councillors?
Mayor Paula, do we need to vote on this if it's already been adopted by resolution?
Well, we need to be aware of it because, as Julie says, it's in the numbers now. And I guess that makes an interesting point. Some of the decisions that we've already made will have already had impact on this plan. Fair comment?
Yes, and just clarify, Councillor Ryan, at the beginning of this session, we brought you a list of proposals that had already been decided by resolution of council. If we had known the decision of this one, we would have included this in that initial list. But at the point when we wrote the report, we didn't. So we just put it here. So we weren't preempting any decision of council.
And it was a recommendation from the community committee to the council. So we do need to resolve something today.
Okay. So questions, councillors? If not, pointers to the resolution. Recommend the resolution which we have to move today.
Happy to move it if necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Bunting. Here it comes. Thank you.
Happy to second as well.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Any questions? Councillor Hamilton, you got your hand up, or is that just to move it?
Oh, I can just speak to it when you're ready.
Cool. So no questions. So we're into debate, and we'll take Councillor Hamilton. Oh, Councillor Bunting, do you want to speak?
No, I'll reply if I need to, but I don't think I will. You go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, this one's pretty straightforward. It's quite exciting what the team is doing with the community investment program and getting some really strategic work behind the external funding program. Obviously, we've got consultant Steve Bramley in there and Lance's team. There's a really robust sort of framework coming in behind all of this, and part of that was also an example. We spoke to Well Energy Trust 2 days ago in part of our submission in support of some of this sort of stuff. So I think this is largely cost neutral for us today, but yeah, pretty happy to push it forward and see how this unfolds in the next 3 to 5 years to support our spend. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further debate? No, we'll go to the tick or cross, please. Thank you. Okay.
Carried unanimously.
I'm sure this next item will be just as short because it's about the Three Waters Reform Transition Planning. Can we get onto the right page, which is 228 also?
Page 200 for the resolution and page 229.
228.
Correct, you 28 for the details. Sorry about that in the chat. So again, this is the funding for the Resource Council to do the work in preparation for the Three Waters, and I'll leave Andrew to answer any questions.
Andrew, can we pop this text down, please, Amy? Thank you.
I can give a brief introduction if that's useful.
Yes, absolutely. Please do.
So this proposal is not intended to be about a debate about the water reform. It's really about a funding provision to respond to the reform. To date, we've got a core Three Waters reform team in council, and that's been funded out of the water stimulus funding program. That's the program that's been reported to the IO committee. And that funding runs out on the 1st of July this year. And so this would provide a provision so that council could respond to all aspects of the reform and engage in select committee submissions, the regulation frameworks, etc., over the next 2 years. And also as part of a, sorry, I've got a frog in my throat here. As part of the discussions with council recently, it's been loaded with an assumption of 100% revenue from central government, but the detail on that's yet to be received or tested. So like, I'm happy just to pause there and take questions in the interest of my throat.
Questions, Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I hope you're able to speak and answer my questions. Do I take it from your introduction, all of the costs that we have incurred to date, which includes the cost of employing a contractor and all of the submissions that we've put into government, and all of the other costs, including our overheads, have already been met by government from the water stimulus package?
Yes, that is the case. All costs have been paid for by government and are intended to be recovered by government through water stimulus through to the 1st of July this year. But
okay. So if the government doesn't come to the party in 23 and 24 with anything around the 1.7 million that we've adopted, will we not do the work? Will we only do the work on the basis that the central government will guarantee that they will reimburse us for all of our costs?
That's a difficult question for me to answer, because the kind of work programs will be things like, the submission to select committee. So those are council decisions. But there's a cost depending on how deep we want to dive into preparing those things and just quite how we want to proceed. I personally think that the notion of a zero contribution from government is unlikely. There will be something, I think, but we just don't know how much or what the detail is. So there could be an opportunity to tailor what we do depending on what's available as well. That could be an option too.
Would you then envisage that that our costs will be kept, a record of our costs will be kept, and there'll be some reporting back as to whether or not the amount that central government pay us, is equal to what it's costing us, or what the shortfall or what the surplus might be?
Yeah, we would. Well, we always record the costs as a matter of course, so there's no question about that. But look, we do report fairly regularly on water reform, and it would be no trouble to provide an update on where things are at. Yeah. I think from my perspective, it's been challenging in the last couple of weeks, simply because information that we're expecting around certain parts of the reform just haven't come through. So hence I struggle to answer your questions a little bit, because there's just a lot we just don't know at the moment still.
Okay, and that information will come back through either council meetings or through infrastructure ops, or whatever the appropriate meeting might be. Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Yep. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Taylor. First McPherson. Sorry.
Yeah. Thanks, Paula, and thanks, Rob, for those questions, which covered a lot of the ground. I'm just wondering whether a motion can be crafted along the lines of one of Andrew's answers, and staff might need to tailor the expenditure to the revenue, at least in some sort of staged thing. We may obviously have to send in invoices or whatever, or some sort of accounting of our expenditure, but I wouldn't like us to see us go through a whole year and send an invoice for 1.7 million. They send us $100,000 or whatever. So I'm wondering whether we can have, and it may be tied to a reporting cycle to council, so that we see that there's income coming in to match the expenditure, or at least for us to be able to see that it's not matching, and then make a considered decision at several stages along the way, so we don't get too deeply out of, or risk getting too deeply out of pocket.
Is that possible, Andrew, to keep a track in that way, to stop spending if the government isn't willing to keep reimbursing as they said they would?
Absolutely, yes. I'm happy to draft some text for consideration in relation to that.
So let's see if we can put that into the resolution in some form.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks. Andrew, thank you for your candour in terms of there are a lot of unanswered questions from the government, and certainly no guarantee that they will pay. In light of that, are we not better to take a much more cautious view and leave it in the plan unfunded until we actually have material proof or a commitment from the government to pay?
That's a equally valid option as well, Councillor.
Sorry.
I mean, I think I've understood you to say that all the costs incurred so far, including our staff time, have been paid. That's been by the government has paid that?
That is correct, and that's reported to every single infrastructure operations committee as part of the stimulus program, and that will continue to the 1st of July. Your suggestion, which is to show the funding beyond 1 July as unfunded, that's an option that's available to council as well.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Oh, I'm good, thanks, Paula.
Okay.
That was answered. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Ms. Paula. Andrew, so if we were to have a line in the budget for this, but leave it as, say, 100% external revenue, which is essentially unfunded, what happens if we, I guess I'm just wondering, what are the risks as we kind of get further into the year if we're still not getting that funding? Does that mean that we would be just holding tight and not taking any steps towards the transition, or would it mean extra pressure on staff? Just what are those risks, and then how could we start there?
Again, it's very, very difficult to answer because I had expected quite a lot of information to have been received around the program in the last couple of weeks, and it hasn't been forthcoming. But I think there'll be a large cost incurred in relation to some of the data extraction requests that are going to come through. So that could be in relation to IT, payroll, finance, unpacking debt. And so I think, to me, it all hinges on one thing, which is getting the best outcome for the community. And so being very proactive around understanding that data rather than simply packaging it up and handing it over as it's required of us, it will allow us to put forward the package when it's requested in a way that's perhaps better for our community. And for example, if I just take the debt, I mean, the city runs its debt largely as a consolidated fund. So, there are many ways to determine what the water component is, and those different ways will give you different values. And DCs would potentially be similar as well. So being proactively funded allows us to do a really deep dive on those data components. But I think I'm happy to, if I pick up on Councillor Wilson's questioning, equally happy to pause and wait and see what comes out over the next 2 or 3 months, and then pick pieces up at that point.
So we could, so just hearing you there, it wouldn't necessarily be a huge risk to us if we waited for some more information, and then it might even be after the annual plan, but that you'd come back to us with an update on getting that external funding, and we could, and if it's still not forthcoming, then we can have make another decision then.
Yeah, the risk is that it will come after the annual plan's approved. That is a risk. But if I just give you a small example, so we were expecting information around the Better Off package in the first week of March. We're now in the 3rd week of March, and we have nothing. So it's very difficult to know when we're going to be receiving information, and then that will have to go back to council in the normal course of decision making. So a pause is a very credible option, I think, right at this point in time.
And final question, I guess, is something in my mind is if, and it might not be an easy question to answer, but if we fund this now, then there's less pressure or room to negotiate in terms of getting that grant funding, compared to actually saying, hang on, like we want to do this well, but we need you to actually come to the table first. Do you have any thoughts there, Andrew, or is it just
so following recent discussions with elected members, circa a month ago, through the Chief Executive Office, we've written a pretty clear letter of expectation to the Department of Internal Affairs and asking for clarification. We've yet to receive a reply to that, but that's on this funding topic. So I keep circling back. There's a lot of irons in the fire, but it's we just don't have any information right at this point in time, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks, Andrew.
Councillor O'Leary.
Yeah, thank you. Morning, Andrew. Thank you. Hey, just a couple of questions, and one I think I know the answer to anyway, but it might be a finance staff question. But the first one, the costs that have been covered so far from government on anything we've spent on Three Waters reform, that came out of the water stimulus funding, that bulk 17, 19 million, whatever it was.
Correct.
And really only because we put a line project in of $500,000 to fund these things, right?
We were one of, or might have potentially even been the only council, but I'll be generous and say we were one of only a very small number of councils that had the wherewithal to actually put that line into that program.
Yeah.
So my understanding, most other councils are just having to find it within existing budgets to date.
Yeah. No, look, that was really a smart thing for us to do. So I guess I'll comment and debate on that. And then the second one, then, if we fund this through debt, through Councillor Wilson's motion that I'm going to second, then we don't rate the ratepayer because it doesn't become OPEX, right? Is that correct?
So the way the proposal is structured at the moment is that it's assuming 100% underwrite from government. And then some of the questions I've heard to date in this discussion today is, perhaps a pause and wait and see till we get information, or even an option I'm hearing is to proceed with this, but only spend once we've got certainty around how much we're going to recover. They're all great options, but the intent here is to not have an impact on the ratepayer.
Yeah.
But my challenge is I can't make that commitment to you because I don't have the information from central government.
No, that's right. You can't. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you.
Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. Andrew, quick question. Is this tailored specifically to Entity B?
No.
Let me elaborate. Look, should the government finally read the mood of the country and euthanize the dying beast that is the 4 entity models, and we progress down a different path with, merging with other councils or, do some work, as we've all agreed this is a good idea, would this still apply, or is it specific to their 4 entity model?
That's a great question. The simple answer is yeah, it would, because when we developed this budget, we tested ourselves based on all of the work we did in the 2016 CCO journey. It doesn't matter really what the model is. If you're going to set up a model, there's a big job to go and extract, debt and, finances and all of that stuff. The task is still the same.
I agree. So yeah. I guess my question is, you're closer to the fire than we are with this, and you're talking to the DIA regularly. Is there any indication that regardless of what form of reform we take on, we would have this kind of reciprocal arrangement with them?
The DIA and government have, to date, as you may well be aware, they're only been discussing a 4 entity model, even though they have the governance and accountability working group report and the terms of reference that wrap around that. I guess from my perspective, DIA haven't talked anything other than 4 entities, but from a process perspective, there's still minister and cabinet decisions to make, and I guess that's part of that gap. We're just waiting to see what's going to play out over the next 2 or 3 months.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, Councillor Van Oosten.
Thanks, Andrew, for your answers. I hear that from you, that in order to be in the best position to put our case forward should a four entity or other model be introduced, we would need to be able to show the value of our assets and the cost to Hamiltonians of supplying that service. Is that correct?
Yeah, the simple way to describe it, because I'm a simple engineer, is if someone's going to come in and remove a value of asset from the ledger, would you trust them to determine what the right value is, or would you want to have a deep understanding and have a view on what the value of the asset is? Because I think there'll be two quite different answers, and then that sheets back to what's best for Hamilton as a community. So I think that's the difference between being funded to do the work and not do the work, in my mind. But if I come back, I still think a pause is a very credible position, because there's a lot that we're expecting to have received in the last few weeks, and we just haven't seen it.
And taking a pause at this point wouldn't necessarily impact us at the point that we hand over whatever the asset is. Is that a fair thing to?
A pause through to even to 30 June, I think has no, because we're funded through water stimulus to the 30th of June anyway. So a pause has no real impact, and I suspect by 30th of June we might have some of the answers to the questions around the program and cabinet decisions by 30th of June anyway. What it means then is your funding.
Yeah, sorry.
What it means then is if council have a view to not include this request in the annual plan, which is fine, it just might mean that it has to be considered outside of the annual plan later in the year. But the benefit of that approach is you'll know what you're responding to then, because you'll have the information.
And also, is it your expectation that the Better Off Fund and what it might cover would be known? And is it also expected that this would be compensated through that, rather than any additional or separate type of compensation?
So the few chats I've had, I'm a firm believer that funds like the Better Off Fund should absolutely underwrite the council costs. But whether anyone listens to those views is yet to be seen. We need to see the contractual terms and conditions associated with the Better Off Fund. There will be contractual terms and conditions. I suspect it will be for everything that's not associated with water, but again, we don't know. Those terms and conditions, we were told we were going to be out in the first week of March. We still haven't seen them. So hence the uncertainty in my responses to date.
Thank you for your answers, Andrew. Thanks, Mayor Paula.
Thank you. Councillor Naidoo-Rowe.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. So I understand we're yet to receive detail on when the reimbursements would be made. Have there been any conversations as to who would cover the interest costs in that lag time? So, whether...
No, there's been no discussions at that level of detail at all. None.
So, if in reality, government could say, yep, we're going to reimburse you, but that money could come in 3 months or in 3 years, and council would be obviously funding that debt till we receive the revenue?
Well, if I just use the water stimulus or even the housing infrastructure fund as examples, typically there's drawdown dates, so if you draw down every 12 weeks, I can't remember what stimulus is, whether it's 12 weeks or monthly, but and NZTA is monthly as well for all of their subsidised programs. So that's what you normally see when government underwrites, a 1 month or a 3 month sort of drawdown window in tranches. Whatever grant money is available, I'd expect it to fit within that sort of typical framework. But I don't have the detail because we haven't received the detail.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Andrew. So so they were hoping to be out at the front end of March, and what I understand from the working parties in Wellington, etc., is it's more towards the end of March, which is problematic from an annual planning point of view. But we should have all of that detail by the time that we fully approve our annual plan, shouldn't we? In May. You'd hope so.
I would hope so. I would hope so. I mean, as much as I'd like to say yes, I can't. I would hope so is the answer.
Yeah. So I mean, it's apropos of not necessarily always knowing more than you do at the political end, Andrew. But my understanding is that those figures, the Better Off package, that they're just tweaking the finalities, having received some feedback from local government, and that should be out shortly. And alongside that, the further funding package, how that's going to work, the details of it. Just so I can't promise anybody a date, but I will follow up post this when I get a break, and I'll be in touch with Local Government New Zealand to see where that's at, and the DIA advisory group that I've been talking with here and there. So my question is, so it's uncertain. So taking any one of those approaches, which I would support, we have to be extremely cautious because it's very frustrating that we don't have all the information to hand. Any one of those options will keep us safe in terms of flexibility before we adopt the final annual plan. At the moment, we're trying to budget. So in terms of, do we put it in or do we hold it back and indicate we'll put it in? I'm just trying to understand, given that government have been quite clear, haven't they, in all their rhetoric, they will pay the full cost of transition. At many hui that you and I have been to, they have said, we will fund the full cost of transition.
Yeah, Paula, is that a question or a speech?
Is that right? Thank you, Ewan.
I just thought I'd help you with your governance.
Oh, thanks. Is that right?
Yes, they've been extremely clear around they will meet the cost of transition, but what I'm looking for is the detailed provisions of how that would work in practice, and
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
what we're waiting for.
Absolutely, I agree. And so just trying to figure out which of the options, the really credible options, Ewan put one up, Dave put one up, which of those credible options is the best way forward for us to retain the flexibility to not spend money on something if we haven't got it back from government or won't get it back from government, because that's absolutely vital. So which one of those options, finance staff, works to protect our interest? You and you'll get to debate shortly, so it's all good.
So question for finance staff. Tracy.
Good morning. I'm trying to understand how we don't bind ourselves, but provide flexible opportunity for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And we can do this in various ways. At the end of the day, if you don't want to include it into the budget, and we obviously go and spend that money regardless, we can highlight that as part of our forecasting and just add it and make sure that we comment on that. So at the moment, for example, with what we've got this year, you'll notice that we didn't have it in the budget anyway, so there's always an extra amount in our revenue, and there's an extra line in our costs that offset that, and then I basically forecast that back in. So from a reporting perspective, we can definitely highlight it and show that it is specific to this particular area, if that's what you would like to do. Obviously, having it in the budget, it's just there, and it makes it easier, I guess, from Andrew's perspective. But again, all of the options presented this morning are really easy for us to do for you.
Okay, I'm just asking genuinely, because I expect there'll be to be some motions from the floor, one of them from you and one of them from Dave potentially, and I was just trying to get my head around which was the most expedient way forward. Okay, councillors, any other questions? Are you going? Okay, no. So what's the way forward with this? What's the resolution at the present time?
Mayor Paula, I've moved one and given it to Amy.
Oh, thank you. Did you do that through chat?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I don't always see chat straight away, but thanks for that.
Amy luckily does and is on top of it.
Yay.
So Paula, staff were writing up mine. I'm not sure whether mine was an amendment or the first one up, and I don't really mind. Yeah,
I have no idea because I didn't.
Mine was
Amy?
the one where there was a staged monitoring and staged expenditure.
That's this one that we're looking at now, isn't it?
I don't know because it's the first I've seen of it. Sorry, who's put this there?
Sorry, that's me just trying to include everything there. I didn't know if you wanted me to include Reports.
Well, Andrew said that he had, though he was under question, of course, the whole time had said that he would be able to construct some text, I think are his words, that would cover it. So I'm not sure whether this is that.
No, I sorry, I've been I haven't had a chance to put any text together. I think I'd prefer to just go in the break and come back on that if possible. The text on the screen, I think, is from the democracy team.
Yeah, look, I'd rather, sorry, Paula.
Okay, no, that's fine. Let's, if there aren't any other questions, we've got Ewan's and we haven't quite landed yours, Dave, so I want to land that properly. Shall we just set that aside, let those staff work on it and go on to the climate change and sustainability resource and come back? Does that make sense, Julie? Can that be done? Hello?
Yes, Mayor Paula, we can do that.
Okay, councillors, this item is just on adjourned while we do the climate change and sustainability one. And if you have any other resolutions in respect to the water item, then we need to know and understand them in plain language, and then we can go through them all. All right.
Thanks.
So,
Julie, would you mind telling us what page we're on for the climate change?
Yes, so this was resolution B1C that we took out that section because it wasn't actually a resolution of council, it was just mentioned at the climate change committee meeting. So that was an error from us putting it there, and we now have put it for discussion here. And Amy, can you share the new resolution on the page, and Sean's going to talk to this.
So there's no explanatory notes anywhere?
No.
Page 266. The proposal's been added at the end of the agenda on diligent.
Thanks, Sean. Oh, there it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
sorry, just correct. It's Councillor Thompson's moving that.
How do we refresh again?
Okay, so you've seen it, everyone. Is there any questions or overrun? Sean, are you going to introduce it or?
Yes, I was going to. Yeah, I just thought there was just some clarity required on where to find it. Councillor Dave, have you got it?
Which page is it, Julie? Please refresh us.
It's 266.
You have to refresh if you're using the original agenda. So I'll just get it up.
I keep putting in my password every time I do that.
Now.
Okay, just while that's happening, if I can, I'll just sort of frame it up. So, and we have sort of talked about this a couple of days ago, and there's two parts to it essentially. So one, there was a budgeting error, which we sort of talked to, which was 100,000, which was accidentally taken out during the LTP process. So we think I think it's an administrative thing as opposed to an item requiring debate, but for transparency, it's been included. And then there's the proposal for the $190,000, and the $190,000 has been sort of signalled through the Environment Committee previously, and was noted that it would be recommended to the annual plan meeting, which we're doing. The resource is to cover 2 additional roles, and this is in response to changes since the LTP. And changes since the LTP are that we have are in the process of developing the climate strategy and the climate policy, and we think off the back of those there will be a requirement for quite a bit more support to the organisation, both in the lead up to the long-term plan, to incorporate climate considerations into asset management plans, for example, and other sort of LTP decisions. Also to enable the organisation when preparing proposals, decisions, strategies, etc., to consider climate impact assessments through that work. And so there's a staff resource to help with that, but also it would be coordinating the activity and helping to direct that activity through the organisation. I guess the alternative, or the way that we've been managing it this year, is that we have had one of those people has been on parental leave, and we have been offsetting some of the increase in costs through basically through proactively managing the budgets in the wider strategy team to manage that. Once we've got a full complement of staff on board next year, as well as the increase in sort of work that we anticipate through the climate strategy and climate policy, we don't think that will be sustainable. I'll just leave it there for now, and can take questions.
Thank you. I think there are some questions. Councillor Pascoe?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Maybe this question might best be directed to the CE. Just following on from our decision or agreed decision yesterday on the staff health benefits, is it possible, Lance, that we could manage this additional resource cost within the current budgets, given that those budgets have had a 5% uplift with the inflation adjustment that we agreed on earlier, that we have agreed on earlier, and rather than this being yet another additional cost?
My view is no. Obviously the health insurance is going to soak up some of that 5%, Councillor Rob, as we discussed yesterday. And we are under pressure to remain competitive in the market. So I'd say this would be an additional resource. So I think that that would be the prudent way to go.
Just looking at the personnel cost line on the LTP for 22-23 sits at just over $100 million, and the 5% will add another $5 million. My question really was framed around, and I know not all of that cost line will represent salary and wages, but it will represent a fair chunk of it. I just figured that maybe there was some opportunity there for that cost to be absorbed into that increase, but clearly you're telling me otherwise.
Yeah, and part of that, Councillor Rob, which I didn't talk about, there's still the CE savings, which are built into the bottom line, and they're actually more than what they are this year. So it actually goes up over the next couple of years. So I'm just mindful of that.
Right, thank you.
So can I just butt in with a point of clarity there, Mayor Paula?
Yes.
Part of Lance's answer was around the health insurance thing. Have we formally approved that, or?
You've approved me making a decision on that.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yep. So yeah, it's a two-edged sword, providing a benefit, but also council wanted a lower risk appetite around our ability to pay people. So yesterday was really an accommodation within that, which I'd like to discuss with the exec team about, do we use the 5% for salary pressures? And you guys gave us a clear steer that you wanted to get as many bums on seats as possible. So we deliver the 10-year plan, and I get that and appreciate that. I'd like to discuss with the exec team about where we go, and do we soak up, that 1.3 million as part of that 5%? Is that the best way to go tactically? And I'll take advice from Dan and the team on that. So, and we'll keep you up to date on that, Councillor Mark.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Lance. Sorry, Paula, I jumped in a bit there. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Councillor Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thanks, Mayor Paula. Just following on from Rob's question, Lance, how many vacancies have we got at the moment of council staff?
I think it's improved, and David might be able to help me improve from when I mentioned a figure the other day. So
it was about 70 the other day, wasn't it?
yeah, about that, I'll just get an update from David. He might have some more up-to-date information, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, it hasn't reduced.
Hasn't reduced. And how long have some of those vacancies been unfilled? Presumably there've been some that haven't been filled for some time.
Yeah, some of them relate to the LTP roles that we're trying to fill, so they've never had someone in the role. Some relate to people that have left, and where the more technical roles are taking longer to fill. But I don't have a number for you, but I would hazard a guess that an average would be around 6 to 8 weeks.
So, is it not possible that we may find during this whole process that there are roles that we don't actually have to replace, that there isn't an urgent need to actually replace them? I know this has happened in Fairfax, where I used to work, that it actually became self-evident after 6 months sometimes that actually we could do without that role, and there was another way of doing things, or we didn't need to emphasise that role or that area as much as other areas. So I guess that's what I'm getting to. Is it not possible that we may find that some of the vacancies don't need to be replaced?
Oh, it is absolutely possible. Whenever we have a vacant position, we do that work to understand how can we do things differently and better. And that work is continuing. So to answer your question, yes, it is possible.
Thank you. So is it not possible, given the stress on the budget and the fact that we are trying not to keep adding to it because we have to borrow to pay for that, that we could find a couple of other vacancies and we could use those to fill these 2 roles that you're after, instead of adding 2 more to the head count?
Yeah, I understand your question. We haven't done that. As I say, we haven't circle back around to all the vacancies to review the work that we've done to say, are all those vacancies needed? But I guess it goes back to the initial conversation we had a few days ago around the pressure around paying market rates for employees, and what sort of provision we're going to need when we do get to recruit people in the into the organisation. That's why we moved it from the 2.5 to the 5%, and now that's less. It gone back to 1.3. You'll remember staff only put forward the 2.5, but we did put the Lance was talking about the fact that that's only kicking the can down the road for another year. So we will work with what elected members approve in the salaries budget, and like we always do, have a look at our work program and just prioritise that work program accordingly.
Can I just add something to that? Because I guess these are sort of relatively known costs. So I think during the course of the year as management team, we do kind of push and pull things as things come up. Where we sort of know things at the start of the year, we try to budget for those, which is what we're and be transparent about putting the budget in for those things which like this. And I guess the other thing is that there is already an allowance or an assumption around vacancies which is factored into the budgets. So there's an assumed vacancy amount already kind of budgeted for. So that is reflected as sort of a negative amount, a negative budget amount in our personnel budgets. So when we're looking at so the strategy budget or there's sort of the climate resource budget, there is already a negative amount in there which reflects an assumed vacancy. So that's embedded across the organisation. So I guess I'm just sort of flagging that we don't want to double count that.
Okay.
Councillor.
Thanks, Paul.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Van Esten.
Thank you. Look, over the last couple of days, at the very least, we've been reminded of government's attention on climate change, and your report also mentions that. Also, that come up through the discussions is new to me, really, a climate adaptation fund that we may be able to put projects up to. Might this be something that we could include in any of the projects that we're putting up to that fund?
Thank you, Maxine. I think with that fund and I guess being able to leverage other revenue opportunities from agencies like central government, the money they put up tends to be for delivery of projects, so the actual work on the ground, which is fantastic. That's generally reflected through so the work that we have in, say, the climate action plan, it would be to fund projects in that. I guess the irony is that to have the staff resource in a centralised sort of function to be able to coordinate and put together those types of applications, that's actually what this type of resource would do. And so having enough resource in the climate strategy team to be able to work with those partners and to leverage those opportunities is really kind of part of what we would expect from these roles. So we absolutely do want to be doing more to leverage those opportunities, but we need some sort of bods to actually lead that work.
And so, in your view, without these staff to put together proposals, any government funding that we might rely on or might put up wouldn't be able to be realised. And what might be the value of that potentially?
I can't put a dollar value on it, I'm afraid, Maxine. My crystal ball gazing is not good enough to be able to kind of predict what the government may or may not do, or what funds they sort of may or may not make available to us. If the proposal for the 190,000 isn't approved today, we would juggle a bit in terms of from both our staff personnel budget point of view, our consultants budget point of view. We would always try to optimize with whatever budget we have got to get the right sort of balance of staff and contract and consulting resource. But there would be a trade-off, and part of it would probably be minimizing or less resource available to do that work. Very hard to quantify exactly though.
Yeah, I get that, but it would give us the best opportunity to be first cab off the rank potentially around maybe pipes on bikes. Bikes on pipes. Oh, other way around. Yeah, bikes on pipes.
Yes.
Kia ora, that's all. Thank you, Sean. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. Sean, so firstly, you talked about the vacancy, like a vacancy factor already being baked into budgets. How much is that approximately in terms of overall budget?
It's done as a percentage. David, can you help me out? Do you remember what that figure is?
Sorry, I was replying to an email, so I didn't hear the question.
Sarah was just asking how much the vacancy factor that's already kind of built, that sort of negative amount that's already built into budgets is. And so I think it's done as a percentage. I'm just wondering if you can help us out with what that percentage is.
It's generally done at 3% of the budget, but I'm not sure what the actual number is for this year.
Okay, thank you. And sure, just in terms of some of the, like looking at, I guess, the difference between what is being proposed and what's currently funded, it appears there would be very little in regard of room to do work, actually commission work like the risk assessments and things. Can you explain what kind of, I guess, things would be that we would need to use professional services funding for?
Sure. So, for example, this year we've used WSP to help do work on emissions targets and profiling, and to help us understand the detail of what emissions are produced in Hamilton, where they come from, and I guess more importantly, what we need to focus on to reduce them. And so there's a requirement for sort of ongoing work in that space. So climate risk assessment for Hamilton City. So we've used KPMG this year to do that, and that's helped inform the climate change policy. So that's the type of work that would again be something that we do. Associated with that is our financial disclosures. So as part of the government framework on our disclosures around climate risks and what we're doing, there's work in relation to that. Some of the sort of partnering type activity is around the climate accord. So we've talked about engaging other agencies and influencers and corporates, etc., in Hamilton on an accord for Hamilton. So that's probably more of a staff resource thing to help coordinate that, but equally it could be contracted resource that manages that type of thing. I guess detail, or sort of, there's sort of probably a bit of unknown stuff, but in response to requests through Environment Committee or through Council and others, that when we are presenting information on certain topics, if more information is required or more detailed information, for example, if we wanted to do a deep dive into electricity usage, which sort of come up through this meeting previously, or to investigate the economics around alternative energy models, that kind of stuff. All of those things require us to engage external expertise.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Okay, so have we had all the questions that we need on this one? So can we go back to the motion just to refresh ourselves, please? Okay.
So can I just explain that very briefly, Mayor Paula?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, so it's in two parts, with sort of one part being the proposal part for the 190,000, and the other one is just the noting proposal, which is the budget correction.
Yeah, Paula, could I ask that they're taken separately, please?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I'll go into debate. Okay.
Are we debating them all as one, Paula?
Yes, yeah, we will. Yeah, we will. We want to get through time today expediently, so we'll go through debate. Sarah, you're the mover.
Yes, thank you. So we have a climate strategy and development that we've had some workshops on, as well as the climate change policy. And these are going to require some fundamental shifts in the way that we do things within the organisation, particularly the policy. We're looking at incorporating climate risk assessments into all relevant decision making. So not everything, but where it is relevant. For example, where a project or infrastructure is going to be impacted by the changes in our climate, which we're seeing, whether it be more rainfall, less rainfall, increased heat. And we're also looking at how our decisions, and business cases and things actually will impact on emissions within the city as well. So right now we're flying blind to some extent, and that policy is going to make really clear what the impact of our decisions are, and help us to ensure that when we're investing in infrastructure, we're making it fit for purpose for a future climate. So we don't have to, so it's resilient, and we don't have to go back later and spend more or have disasters on our hands because it wasn't actually designed appropriately. So this kind of work is really critical, both in terms of adapting and also playing a role in reducing emissions. Our organisation, however, is not, and right now we don't have the skills throughout the organisation to actually do this. And so a key part of this will actually be having someone to support departments to do this work. Otherwise, we're going to find that we can sign off a great policy, but we're really not going to be able to implement it well throughout the organisation. We've also got work such as the Climate Accord. If we want to really bring other businesses and organisations together to be working together to reduce emissions, so it's not just us leading alone, then we do need someone to be helping to coordinate that work. And there's a whole range of other work that currently we have happening in the Environment Committee, which will be really important going forward, measuring our emissions, being able to provide updates and measure our progress on how we're going with reaching targets. So this funding is going to be really critical, and while I hate to be here putting another motion forward for funding, we will be severely limited in what we can do in progressing our strategy and policy if we don't have some additional funding. And I think that there's a risk if we try to absorb this in existing budgets, and we're negating the work that we've already done to ensure there's adequate funding for salary inflation and recruitment and retention. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Seconder was Councillor Gallagher. Do you want to talk to it?
No, I think at this point, Deputy Chair Sarah has explained it very well.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Taylor, or Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Yeah, look, thank you, Sarah, for the explanation. And I don't think there's anyone, well, I can't speak for others, but I'm certainly supportive of our climate change work and of the imperative behind it. I am still not satisfied that we cannot be filling these vacancies from elsewhere, and that enough work has been done to look into that possibility. If we're going to spend money in this annual plan, then I would so rather that it actually went directly out into the community rather than back into this building. The burial lawn was an example of that, and that was something I could support. We're facing the prospect of having to borrow for pretty much whatever we approve today, adding to our headcount, adding to our staff, adding to our bureaucracy should be the last priority. So I'm really hoping that management will step up and shuffle the deck here. And I repeat, I am supportive of our climate change work. It has to be done. It's important. But then there's other things already have been approved during the last 4 days that have added more cost into the building. And we just can't do everything. So I'd like to see management try harder to find these vacancies within existing resources. Thank you.
Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Sarah. I really respect the great passion that you and Martin, as the leaders of our Environment Committee, have on the tasks that are ahead of you. Like Deputy Mayor Jeff, though, I'm a little bit concerned that we're not achieving the outcomes that we sought when we set up an environment committee, and it was about partnership with our community. And where is the community in terms of helping to fund this? I accept the CE's explanation that it's not possible to fund it out of existing resources, but I do hope that they might have a further look at it. But I'm wondering where our community is. We have central government, which since us setting up our committee have declared a climate emergency. So where are they with some funding? Where are some of the other external funders out there. For example, the insurance industry. You know, they must be well and truly, I won't say writing checks out at the moment, but they must have some huge costs that are coming about with climate events that are happening in New Zealand. Where are they in terms of providing some support? Why is it that our poor ratepayer becomes ultimately the payer of all of the activities that we deem as city leaders, are necessary to fund? It just doesn't seem right to me. And I think what we have perhaps a tendency to do is just to keep adding these costs on and on. They're relatively small on their own, but when you look at what we have had to consider over the last 4 days, cumulatively, they add to millions and millions of extra dollars. Thank you.
Councillor Van Oosten.
Look, thank you, and I acknowledge Chair of Finance, Rob's, good words about the cost. However, I think when we look at our responsibility as a council, it's not just the financial responsibilities we need to weigh up. There's far more well-beings than that, and the environment is absolutely one. We're starting to write out cheques now that we cannot pay for in an environmental sense unless we take some real actions. And in terms of that, we made a commitment to our community that we would treat climate change with urgency, and to date I don't see a lot of action that sits in behind that. I am fortunate enough from time to time to attend workshops and education sessions actually that Sarah and Martin have organised through the Environment Committee, and I attend those meetings as well, and I'm blown away with the knowledge that that staff bring to those, skilled and researched information that we need to be able to rely on to make great decisions. And look, in order to meet those strategies and our policy, we need to have really skilled staff in order to be able to help us. And I think that there are opportunities that we may miss out on should we not have these people in place to give us that. Possibly there's funders to be making appeals to deliver on the projects that we want to see and that we've identified already in this process are important to us as a council. And there'll be others, I've got no doubt, that unless we have people in these roles identifying opportunities, we'll be left trying to fund those and to meet that climate action urgency that we've promised and be found wanting. And I, for one, don't want to be seen in that position. So I'd like to support Councillor Sarah and Martin's motion and urge you to also. Thank you.
Councillor, Councillor Bunting.
Hello there. Must play slaps with you one day, Dave. Hey, Sarah. I support the work of you and your deputy, whichever way it is. I support your intention. I'm moved by Deputy Mayor's idea, but the fact is, if we approve 2 more staff, effectively, we're actually approving 2 more vacancies. So we go from 70 to 72 vacancies while we look for more people. I agree. I think we should be looking within tweaking the job description of the vacancies that are out there at the moment. However, I will be supporting the $100 correction because that's existing staff, but I won't be supporting the other part of the motion for that reason. But I don't disagree with Maxine entirely about the need, and you about the need for what we're doing. But I think there is another mind to look at, and that is in the vacancies.
Thank
Your turn,
you,
Dave.
Councillor Dave.
Thank you, Bunty. Just returning the favour, you might recall. Look, it's lovely that everyone is recognise climate change and the need for us to do action, it's even lovelier that your confidence that staff can find out of some rabbit hole somewhere the funds and the staffing resource to perform the work that's needed. For those of you who've actually attended the Environment Committee over the last 2 years, you'll know without a shadow of doubt that we have really struggled to get a plan done, to get the issues outlined in the plan monitored, and certainly to get that plan implemented. We have struggled with lack of staff, lack of resource, lack of focus by the organisation on that. So while in some cases I would agree with Bunty and Jeff, for instance, that we ought to be looking within our own existing staffing resources and vacancy pool of money and that sort of thing, it's clear that we need to give it more focus than that. Now, whether you agree with the words climate change urgency or emergency, I don't think it really matters. It's how much attention we pay to that, what plans we put in place, and what implementations arise out of that, and how quickly you can do it as well. Now, during Jeff's talk, totally fortuitously, on my phone, a stuff headline popped up. You know how those pop-ups happen at all odd times, and the words of this stuff headline were, and I quote, "Biblical floods in New Zealand and a heat wave in Antarctica, are they related?" I think that's just an example. We have certainly had far more severe weather events, both in New Zealand and around the world, in very recent years than you would have been talking about 10, 20 years ago. I think we have a responsibility, and I think it's urgent, and it is an emergency in my opinion, but even if it's not an emergency, it's certainly something we need to be paying more attention to than we've been able to do so far. Our organisation has not been set up to work in this area previously. It's clear that we've struggled to switch focus. This is going to, both of these motions actually are going to help us do that. If we don't do that, then we're going to struggle again, I suggest, for the next 3 or 4 years before we can actually put some resource into one of the areas that the public have certainly identified as being needed for us to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Paula. The reality is there is common agreement across this council that we have a climate urgency, and we need to do everything we possibly can to address it. And I think it's showmanship, and I wouldn't have expected anything less of Councillor McPherson other than to wheel out his bag of tricks of emotional
Point
headlines.
of order.
Yes, what's the point of order, Dave?
Personal attacks happening at the moment. I thought you had asked particularly Councillor Wilson not to do that yesterday.
Yes, let me say this once for clarity, and then you can have all your time, Ewan. Councillors, stick to the issues and do not make attacks on other people as in the debate. Thank you. Off you go, Councillor Wilson.
It is clear that in these times of passionate debates, people put forward all sorts of emotional explanations and justifications for their argument. And the reality in this case, you're already singing to the converted. We're all agreeing that there is a level of urgency. But I remind you all that you then selectively ignore that the true issue is one of this organisation is already appropriately funded, and we as governors have to say to management, find the funds within the budget. And let's not think this is an unreasonable budget. We are approving $102 million in payroll. And we've given an additional 2.5% of inflationary uplift to the existing inflationary uplift of 2.5 for a total of 5, which adds another $2.5 million. And that you then say that it's up to us to fund more. What I'd be saying to management is live within the generous funding we have provided. Now, yesterday there was a lot of discussion of legacy. Let me talk about legacy. In 2012, when I was on council, we said that by 2021, we would have a debt of $400 million. We had a debt of $631 million. In the time that I've been in local government, our rates have doubled. The reality in the last 10 years, we have not delivered all of the projects that we promised. The point I'm trying to make is the system, the council machinery is wrong, and we've got to change it. What we've done in the past as governors is we've thought the solution to that change was spend more. We've got it wrong. It's about right spending and right sizing.
Time, please.
And that's the critical point.
Thank you. Sorry, you're out of time. Thank you. Councillor O'Leary.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, it's always a difficult one to fund staff positions. And of course, we did one, I think yesterday or the day before, it's all becoming a bit of a blur, under my portfolio because we needed to do that. Look, I agree that in an ideal world, we should be able to find resource within existing budgets, but we've heard through these last 5 days that we're needing to, I think the quote was, stack the decks in terms of staff, that we need those budgets and the increase that we've put in budgets for when we can fill these positions, because we're not able to deliver all of our projects for all sorts of reasons. But we're giving conflicting messages, I think, to staff. We're saying on the one hand, fund these new positions through existing budgets when we're struggling to fill because we're struggling to fill them, but we're actually cannibalizing, I think we're cannibalizing our messages to staff because we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, basically. I feel sorry for the Environment Committee. We said at the start of this term, or I believe it might have been last term actually, that climate change and building a better world was important to us. But we're not actually prepared to give this committee the tools to be successful to do that. So I think what we're saying and what we're doing has a bit of a gap between it. And as I said, I had to put forward an extra resource so that we can do a better job with engaging with our community in the transport area. So for all of those reasons, I will be more than comfortable to support this resource that's needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Naidu-Rowe.
Thank you. And I 100% agree with Councillor Angela, actually. On one hand, you know, we've got the issues of staff well-being and the pressures that our staff are under and our responsibility to them. On the other hand, we've got all the financial pressures that we're dealing with, which are not actually going away, and they're going to be with us for a while yet. So it comes down to prioritizing the debt, essentially. And if we are serious about managing the impacts of climate change, then it's our responsibility to give the staff the tools they need to actually do the work. So I'm going to trust the staff with this one and support this proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Gallagher.
Yes, thank you. And I'm certainly not in any way going to give an emotive speech. And I realise that this year in our democratic process is an election, and realise one of the election issues, of course, will be an incredible focus naturally on climate change issues as the major issue of our time. And I just want to personally acknowledge as Chair the incredible work that Sarah has actually done with staff, with our regular meetings with our staff team. In my capacities, thank you for giving me this job. I've learned a lot, Paula, on this journey. It's been a journey for me, to be honest. I thought, as chair of the environment, and learned a heck of a lot from Sarah, of course, and also from the very few staff we have on the ground in this work area. And literally there are days where, what's happening? Some wonderful staff person's away on maternity leave. Another person is on sick leave. We are literally in that area, with due respect, running absolutely, dare I say it, on the smell of a fossil fuel oily rag. And I just want to say that we have our committee structure, and we've got some incredible, the way you've done it, I think is good. And we've got some specialist committees, for example, the district plan scheme, the HUGs. These are areas that are hugely important of work, and actually all the work they're doing will, of course, have impact also on the next long-term plan that you're going to be faced. And it's really important in these areas we are adequately resourced, and most importantly, we are guaranteed that resource. So in my capacity as chair of the Environment Committee, I do feel if we, with respect, and I totally respect an alternative argument and the sincerity with which that's shared around the table, my advice to you actually is that we will compromise to a degree the work we're trying to do. And those of you who are around the table in 2 years for the LTP will need the work that we're doing.
Thank you. So I was desperately scribbling some notes to add something to the debate. Thank you, Martin. I set up the Environment Committee for a very good reason, multiple reasons, but one of them was, of course, as a climate, to lead the climate response. We saw so strongly how the general public, and especially our young citizens, felt about climate change issues and the need to respond to these before the last election, if you recall, when they marched to Civic Square in great numbers. In fact, they marched all around the country. We do need expertise, and I accept from having spoken to Sarah, Martin, Sean, that those people do not currently exist within the building. So we do need to find them. We need to find the right expertise to drive the change. I also want to put my vote of thanks towards Sarah and Martin, Sarah in particular for taking a lead on what she was passionate about and came to council as that was one of your reasons for standing for council, to promote better outcomes in this space. We're not far away from seeing that wonderful climate action plan strategy, and when it's in place, we need to start doing things. And so I'm going to support this in respect to, I understand Ewan's really well made points about existing vacancies, and I do want to put on notice that I need to understand more from staff about, do we need to fill all those vacancies? Do we need to keep that space? Can we do things smarter? Because I think absolutely he's right in that respect. We'll have to do more with less, just like many places around the country are doing. But in this respect, I think it would be really surprising if I didn't support it, when I have supported the Environment Committee for climate, for the protection of our green spaces, and for sustainability. We'll go to the vote, please. Oh, write a reply.
I have
Sarah.
provided a reply, thank you. Firstly, I just want to thank everyone for their debate. And I'd like to respond to a few things. Firstly, Councillor Rob mentioned where is the community in this, and I firstly I want to say that I've taken that on board, but I also want to give some examples of where the community is already participating in our work and supporting it. For example, the university is providing support in terms of our climate strategy and has offered to work with us to provide feedback and ideas and review it. So they are really interested in working alongside of us. We originally were going to fund a carbon calculator that would assist us with major projects to work out how they could contribute to reducing emissions within the city, particularly transport projects. And actually Waka Kotahi has turned around and decided to fund that so that all councils can use use that tool. And we're also working closely with Waikato Regional Council and keep both staff and at a governance level, we keep close contact. But absolutely, I'll have conversations with our general manager to see what we can do further. I'd also like to respond to the comments around working within existing budgets. I feel like I'm in two different meetings where at the very beginning we're talking about being realistic, about ensuring that we were responding to inflationary pressures, and which is why we put in that 5%. And I am concerned that we're going to start eating away at that when we need to attract and retain staff. Finally, I thought Councillor Maxine made a good point that there's another kind of paycheck that we're looking at here, and another kind of book that we're trying to balance in terms of limits of our climate. And right now we're withdrawing every day, and we're creating an intergenerational problem that we need to address urgently. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for the good debate. Appreciate it. Let's go to the vote.
Yeah, Paula, can we see the motions, please? Which ones we're voting on first?
We're just doing the first one. Oh, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess we're doing the first one first, but I still.
Yeah, thank, no, that was a good reminder. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We're going to the top one first. If you press your little green tickle button.
The motion is carried 7-4, 6 against, noting Councillor Wilson, Councillor Bunting, Councillor Donovan, Councillor Pascoe, Councillor Hamilton and Deputy Mayor Taylor are dissenting.
Thank you very much everyone, and I think staff, that's pretty clear because the split is so close. It's a pretty clear steer around the use of vacancies. Let's move on to the second one, please. Do you need to see it again, Mark, or everybody got it in their brain? Okay, we'll go to the vote. Thank you. Ewan? Oh, thank you.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Okay. We will have a 10-minute break and come back fresh for the Three Waters. It is 11 o'clock, so I just think it might be a good break time. 10 minutes. Back at past.
Thank you.
Sorry, who had something to say?
No, I was just saying thank you.
Oh, and I hope that all of you will get up from your seat and do a few steps at least round your office or something. Sitting's not good for you.
I might go do some vacuuming.
Okay, thank you, councillors. We are now back on to the Three Waters one, Julie. Yes?
Yes, Mayor
Julie?
Paula, we will go back to, I understand we now have the resolutions for Amy to pop those up.
Okay, so we will ask each councillor to...
Your Worship, just procedurally,
Mm.
I had submitted my motion to Amy before Councillor McPherson, so I'm a little confused.
Okay, let me check that out because I didn't see either. So, Amy, which order did you receive them
That's
in?
not correct. I spoke before Councillor Wilson, immediately before, admittedly, and said that I'd like to move a motion to this effect and asked if staff would help word it so that it came out correctly. And that was then Councillor Wilson spoke and sent his through afterwards.
So just to correct facts, Amy, the first request for a motion was from Councillor McPherson, was it? I didn't see any of it in the background, and I don't want to put you on the spot, just in terms of order, that's all.
And there was a lot of back and forth in the chat. I haven't put either one in order, and technically neither had been brought to the table until now, where we're now confirming the status of them, where we're accepting them in the meeting. I also don't have a seconder based on my current memory for Councillor McPherson's ones, which is why I have on purpose listed both as a motion/amendment, because I don't know which one was in first.
Okay, so we'll just have to work it out with reasonably.
Look, Paula, I don't mind if Ewan sees it as that much of a competition. Put mine as the amendment. I didn't have a second because it's the first time it's been able to be shown to anyone. So put it as the amendment. It doesn't worry me.
Thank you.
But it is important we're actually factual, and you can go back and check the speaking order.
Can someone consider seconding Councillor McPherson's?
Yes, I will, Mayor Paula, but maybe with a small change, and that is subject to an agreement with government to fund all the costs.
Sure, happy with that, Rob. That's consistent.
Okay, excellent. That's good.
I'll second that. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Wilson, can you just explain without debate, because you get to debate, what you're achieving with your motion?
That we're committing no funds until the government commits in writing to pay all costs, including that of any finance costs, to complete the task.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Councillor McPherson, I was almost calling you McGallagher then for a reason.
McGallagher, that's a combination Scottish-Irish.
Was.
Look, I guess the difference here is the use in the motion of Ewan's of the word unfunded, whereas this would show in the annual plan both as a revenue line item and as an expenditure line item of equal amounts, and wouldn't be actioned until the government signs that agreement and has a regular monitoring option written into it, so that the Finance Committee would have the job each meeting of checking on how that agreement is being actioned.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Paula. I guess this probably to staff. In a practical sense, other than the addition around requesting ongoing reporting, in a practical sense, is there any real difference between what is the real difference between the two, or is there any?
I will have to defer to the annual plan team in terms of the practical difference around disclosure. From my perspective, there's no real difference, but there may be from a reporting or disclosure perspective. I don't know if Julie or Tracy are the right people to pick that one up.
Tracy, do you want to answer that from a financial perspective first?
Yes, thank you. Just a slight difference because the $1.7 million, so the second one, the amendment, still includes that revenue and still includes the costs, which does actually have an effect on our, just a slight effect on our debt to revenue ratio graphs, because obviously it's already included. It gets picked up in that particular graph itself. So overall, from a balancing the books or an accounting result, neither, because obviously it's net from that perspective. But it does just change ever so slightly, that one graph when we're looking at it.
Mayor Paula, just a procedural point. I'm withdrawing my motion. Councillor O'Leary may choose to find a mover, but I'm withdrawing mine.
Okay, thank you.
Cool, thanks for that. Easy.
Hang on. Oh, yeah, sorry, hang on. I don't know why he's withdrawing, but I will move that instead then.
Do you have a seconder?
Maybe not. Obviously not. Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank
Oh,
you.
oh,
Yeah.
it's gone
No,
already.
that's fine. I just vote
I can
how
second that
vote.
one.
Kesh has seconded.
Okay. Thanks.
Question, Tracy, from me, just on the back of Sarah's question about the differences. When we were having questions in the before we came to the decision, the vote, I think you said it's helpful to have. Did you? Or oh, no, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Did you suggest it might be helpful to have it in the budget, and we can move it from there if it's not? Or does sitting outside the budget have any material impact in terms of?
So just because this particular one has that associated revenue with it, so like I say, it will just ever so slightly affect that debt to revenue ratio graph that we have, but just ever so slightly. So I can make, at the end of the day, I can make both work.
And Mayor Paula,
can I ask? Yes.
So can I just also answer your question? From a transparency purpose, having the lines in your budget with the clear statement around expenditure and you expect that to be funded, also adds some transparency for the community.
And Andrew, I was going to ask a similar question to that in terms of our ability to work with government and press upon them to live up to their expectations and their promises. Would this motion be helpful? Because it puts it there, but it challenges it.
Sorry, which the amendment does, the motion as an unfunded one doesn't.
Does it make any difference with the one that? Oh, sorry. No, let's go back because I thought it'd been removed. Of course, it hasn't. The one that looks at Councillor McPherson's motion, but keeps some money there, but only insofar as we keep getting it repaid by government and the agreement is reached. Is that, or is it better leverage to not include something and going, well, we're not going to include anything until you do what you say you're going to do?
Just
sorry, maybe that's unfair political question.
Yeah, thank you.
Apologies. I'll speak to that in my own thoughts. Thank you anyway. All right.
I've got a question, Mayor Paula.
Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Andrew. So should just procedurally, you probably guide me through the outcome of this. Should the amendment fail and the motion fail, we are essentially paused. Is that right? Nothing's allocated, nothing's arranged.
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
All right. No, I just wanted to know where we were left. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Oh, sorry, if I may, just to be crystal clear.
Sure.
We have still got government funding as an organisation to the 30th of June this year. So from 1st of July onwards, we would be paused.
Yeah, and you can still carry on dialogue anyway. It's not like suddenly. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going into the debate. We'll do the debate. Tripping over my tongue today. We will do the debate together, as we do, and we will. Of course, take the amendment and then take the motion. So, Councillor O'Leary.
Did you decide what was what? I mean, doesn't worry me.
Yes, Councillor McPherson ceded, and your motion is the motion, so you get to speak first.
Okay. Look, I don't have a lot to say. I'm just not prepared to rate the ratepayer on a hope and a prayer that what's being promised to us to be funded will actually be funded. They've been less than forthcoming in responding with information through the entire Three Waters reform. And as we've heard from staff today, there's still no guarantee or even information on what we might get paid, when we might get paid, and what that amount might be. So I just am not comfortable to rate the ratepayer nearly 1% of what would be a 1% rates increase if we were to go down that route. And you know, all credit to staff for having the smarts and the intellect to slip into our water stimulus funding that $500,000 to fund us so far, because had they not done that, we would have been funding $500,000 up till June this year via debt. So that's all that's my points, mate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks. Look, neither the motion nor the amendment involves rating ratepayers extra. They just have a different way of handling the same problem, which is that we're not 100% confident that the government's going to come across with the goods to enable the change to be managed by us. The reason that I've put the amendment forward is I think it was Tracy, or sorry, it might have been Julie saying it, the words transparency. It's actually important, I believe, to be transparent with our community. What are the costs and are we going to get the money? And then have a check and balance system. Now, if it's unfunded, it's not in the budget, it doesn't show in the same way, if it shows at all to the community that we're going to be spending that much money, and in return we're going to be receiving that much money. That's the first bit. The second bit, the reason that I asked for ongoing monitoring and the ability therefore for council to review its involvement in the change program is that this has been a very changeable, moving feast, shall we say, and we know that there's been changes. There are likely to be more changes, and they may include the amount of money that's available for local councils to manage the change. And I don't want us to say yes in June to something because government said we're going to give it to you, and then not have an easy, regular way of checking that is actually coming across, the agreements being held to by the government, because so far that hasn't proved to be fully the case, and we're all, I know, a little bit suspicious about whether they will come across with the goods. So let's just monitor that along the way. Let's be transparent with our community. It's not going to cost them any more, is the theory. Let's make sure that can be the practice, and let's make sure we keep checking that.
Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thanks, Mayor Paula. Look, I can't bring myself to support either of these today, because we are putting the cart so far before the horse in terms of where this Three Waters conversation is at with our own residents. Getting the best outcomes for the community was mentioned by a staff member. The councillor just mentioned transparency with the public just a moment ago. When I think of those phrases in terms of our treatment of the Three Waters, I just about fell off my chair. I think it's extraordinary that we're even having this conversation today. I'm astounded. Here's a plan proposed by the government, opposed by most of the councils on the land, a plan that hasn't been consulted with our own community, despite repeated requests from some elected members. And nor do I buy the line that there's nothing to consult about, because it's quite simple. The four entities model has been with us since day one, and it still is. It's quite clear. I'm not going to support any commitment at all when our community has been left out in the cold. I think it's outrageous to be going this far. We're here to represent 170,000 people for us to make a $1.7 million commitment, funded or unfunded, for something so controversial and with such huge implications without having had a conversation with the public. And it's disingenuous to cloak it as somehow generic work and not heading towards the four-entity model. We even say so in the report. We describe it that way in our staff quote in the report. It says, Three Waters Reform Transition Planning to deliver the work required to ensure the smooth transition of Council's Three Waters assets and operations to Entity B. So doesn't get much clearer than that. So all of this work, all of these discussions are happening regardless of what our community feels, and we have so far been complicit in keeping our residents out of the conversation, out of the discussion, out of the loop. I'm not going to be any part of continuing that injustice. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor Paula. I think it's absolutely critical that if any form of reform is going ahead, that these costs need to be covered by central government, and that we need to have certainty around that before we start to spend ratepayer funds. So I will support either the amendment, I'll support the amendment, and if that fails, then the motion, because I think both of them in a practical sense are the same. Both of them are saying we're not going to rate for this. We're going to expect 100% external revenue to fund this, and we won't start before we have confirmation of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, this is not a debate today about the support for or lack of support for the Three Waters discussion. It's purely a discussion around who's going to fund the information that government are asking us to provide them in terms of the operation of our waters and the extent of the assets that we have. I've got a slightly different view to the promoter of the motion, in that to date we have been fully reimbursed for the costs that this council has incurred. And I would expect that to be ongoing. And I think what the amendment does is it puts a little bit of a block there to say, yes, we'll continue to provide the information that government may need from time to time, but we expect government to reimburse that cost. And if they don't, then we won't provide the information. There's no suggestion that they won't fund it, but of course we haven't got at this stage the assurance that they will. But look, I'm confident that government will come to the party with any costs that we incur. They've made it very clear that it's not intended that any council should be worse off as a result of their proposal. And I again stress it is government's proposal, not ours. Look, I'm confident that the amendment will give us all the ammunition we need. And look, at the end of the day, it is and it will remain neutral, cost neutral, irrespective of how the government decides their options around funding or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxine.
Kia ora, thank you. I think in terms of transparency, I think it's critically important that we put this amendment, as Councillor Dave has put it, into our plan. It offers an opportunity for our community to be informed about this budget line, and it gives us an opportunity also to talk about how it might be counter paid. So I think that that's really important, and in terms of consultation, that's a really responsible thing for us to do. There's a lot that's unknown about the Three Waters at present, and to deep dive into all of that through this process isn't wise until we have all those facts. What we do know is that it is being pressed on by government at this stage, that position hasn't changed, but that what we also know is that we need to be in our very best position to be able to, should it be going ahead, to be able to put Hamilton's case, to protect Hamilton residents' position and their investment over the years in the very best light. And by having this in the budget line shows that we are thinking about that, and it gives us a budget line to be able to resource into that work that's going to be needed in there. And that's not just about what the value of the assets is, as Andrew told us through the questioning. There's salaries to be considered, through the payroll, the IT, and certainly unpacking the debt that goes along with that. And we know that that's a consolidated fund of our debt, and that it's not always easy to be able to identify what of that belongs in the waters service. So we absolutely need to have that analysis, and I'll be supporting Dave's amendment. I beg your pardon.
Thank you. Councillor Naidoo-Rowe.
Thank you. I will be supporting Councillor O'Leary on this one. The way I read it is that it's not in support of the reform itself, but it's to support a pause, to pause the funding commitment or the potential funding, to see the transition through. I'm not against the amendment. I'd just rather wait for all the information to arrive before we can actually commit any sort of funding towards transition. We heard from Andrew, from the staff, that this is a reasonable option. We've got enough funding till the end of June, so let's just wait for the actual information to arrive so that we can make a proper informed decision. And there's nothing stopping this coming back to the Finance Committee once we actually have the information and we know what we're committing ourselves to. Personally, I have diminishing confidence in receiving funding. So I'm a bit wary about any sort of commitment without seeing it in writing first. Personal experience, totally off topic, but we were asked to provide vaccine passes a few months ago to the public overnight, which we all, pharmacy, rallied and provided these passes, but to date we still haven't been paid for it, and that was an overnight promise that we still haven't seen materialize. And now the government's going back and doing up contracts and making us jump through hoops for work that's already been done. So I'm just very wary, and I'd rather just pause.
Thank you. Councillor Donovan.
Yeah, Paula. Mine's really just a cut and paste of Kesh's words as well as a bit of Rob as well. So I will be supporting the Wilson O'Leary thing, whatever it is, motion or amendment. And just wanted to say that. Kia ora.
Okay, thank you. I'll just, everyone had a debate. I'll just have a few words. You're frustrated, I'm frustrated, I think we're all frustrated, and I think we have every right to be frustrated because the process and the communication has been far from good with this whole project and lately also. But we must have some resource in this plan, because this is a draft plan and we have got time to change our views. I'm going to support Dave's amendment because I think it's really important to have some resource at hand, and be transparent about that. But I also think it's really important to be able to put this hard brakes on those if they let us down. They have promised that we will be funded for transition. I am not about to let them forget that. I'm going to push and push and push for them to deliver on their promise around meeting the cost of transition. But going back to why we need some resource, we need it because I'm looking into Wellington. I'm hearing all the advisory groups. I'm on a number of advisory groups. Some nature of reform is more than highly likely. And so we must prepare ourselves, but we must continue to inform change so that it better suits us. So this is about participating so that we get the best deal from council. It's always been about that. None of us like the 4 entities, full stop. We've said that many, many times. And we've all agreed that as soon as these details that we so desperately want from government come out, we will consult further with the public. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. Look, make no mistake, if we support the amendment or the motion, this will get twisted as our support for the 4 entities model. Mayor Paula just recently said, assuming transition. Now, if we are transitioning, the only option on the table is entity B or the 4 entity model. Now, I don't accept that. So I won't be supporting either of these in this case. I applaud and I'm grateful for the wisdom of not funding anything until we see the colour of the government's money, because there are countless examples of how disorganised and this is, and reasons that we shouldn't be trusting that this money is forthcoming. So I think we're making a bold statement there. I get that, and I appreciate that of both the mover and the amender. But just speaking to a couple of points that were made by speakers earlier on, I think Councillor Sarah said, look, if and I hope I've taken this right, Sarah, if any form of reform is to be considered, it needs to be planned for or funded for. Am I right with that? Unfortunately for me, the wording of both the motion and the amendment assumes that this is to entity B. Now, quacks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's a duck. And the public hate it. The polls will hate it. I still think entity B is toast. So I just think these the motion and the amendment are far too restrictive. Plus, we haven't even formally asked the community yet. So it's the words in the motion. Okay, so the words in the motion say it, the amendment says it, the staff report says it. This is all about the transition to entity B, and I do not accept that is the way to reform. I agree with reform, and if the motion had said to reform without entity B, I would be supportive of it, but I'm not. It is tagged to entity B. So again, look, I've got so many, look at my angry notes. I've been scrolling all over the place. I can't even read them now. I'm so passionate about this. I also am reluctant to be a part of a unanimous vote on this for reasons that I outlined at the very, very, very beginning of this meeting. But make no mistake, and I'm wrapping up here, make no mistake, if we support either the motion or the amendment, do not be surprised and don't come crying to me when this gets twisted to be seen as acceptance of the 4 entity model. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Wilson.
When the history is written about this current government, the Three Waters proposal will be noted as being the beginning of the end. Their proposal is so inherently and structurally unsound. I'm absolutely astonished that it still wanders along aimlessly, looking for existence. I think all of those who have pinned their political credibility on Three Waters will regret that decision. I hear frequently, even from those who have pinned their political careers to Three Waters, that the government can't be trusted, that there's a whole lot of unknown facts, that not all the facts are available. And that does beg the question, how have they ever let themselves get into the position that they've attached themselves to such an unsound premise? And you would imagine somewhere along the journey, they would go, we should stop digging. We should realize we've made an error. But they don't. They just keep digging because they're committed. Here's the issue of transparency. Three Waters was never appropriately consulted with in terms of the public. the 4 mega entities was flawed. The surrendering of its ongoing governance to an unvoted entity is flawed. And as such, I agree with Councillor Bunting and the Deputy Mayor that being associated with it in any form would be an error. I did try, and I did begin to think, well, we're sort of sailing down this road. I've got to at least try to protect the ratepayers by not forking out money until we've actually got money from the government. But I realized by even sending that little message of financial prudence that the government will misinterpret it and accept it as compliance. I'm not falling for the trap.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Can we see the motions again, please? Oh,
Can
sorry.
I speak?
Yes, you can. Councillor
Yeah,
Gallagher.
look, Councillor Wilson's original motion, which Angela took over, is also very helpful. Let's be crystal clear that this is a budget process. This is a process to get the best deal for Hamilton, irrespective whether there's a blue or red or whatever government. This is a process by which we will consult fully. And I make it crystal clear, I do not personally agree with the current model. And a number of us have clearly stated that. We haven't pinned our political colours or whatever to whatever barrow. We want to get the best deal for Hamilton. I've talked about sincerity of contribution. I've talked about not being and I'm trying not to be emotive. I think this is just clearly a procedural situation where we need to cover ourselves and get the best deal for Hamilton. Of course, this is going to involve comprehensive public consultation.
Thank you. Can we see the motions, please?
It will fade back in a moment.
Is your screen running out of ink?
Yeah.
All right, we'll go to the.
Well, no, can I have my right of reply?
Yeah, right of reply. Yeah.
Thank you, Martin. Look, I don't like this. I don't like the Three Waters reform. But I haven't seen any council yet been able to slow this juggernaut down. That doesn't mean to say that I support any part of it. The reality is that costs have already been incurred and further costs will be coming down the pipeline. This is, as Councillor Pascoe suggested, how we deal with those costs. I think anyone saying that support for the motion is support for Three Waters reform would be extremely scurrilous. Look, for me, I feel like if we accept this into our budget, as the amendment suggests, that to me feels like support, and that to me feels like we're just rolling over. And I can't do that for the majority of our residents who are opposed wholeheartedly to this reform. Councillor Pascoe said to date we have been fully reimbursed. Actually, we haven't, not willingly. And as we heard from staff today,
point of order, Chair, that's misinformation, because I made that statement on the basis of the answer to my question by Andrew Parsons.
Yeah, that's right, you did. Your statement was we have been fully reimbursed to date. Yeah. And if you'd let me finish, so that's right, you did say that. But what I'm saying is actually we haven't, not willingly by the government. The only reason we've been funded to date for that 500,000 is because our staff had the smarts to include it in a line of projects with our water stimulus funding. So as we heard from staff, most other councils haven't received anything. The government hasn't willingly paid anything so far to cover costs from councils for Three Waters reform. Look, I don't accept the Three Waters reform. I don't accept including costs into our budget. And I don't accept the processes and the way that the government has dealt with and treated the majority of councils in New Zealand on this issue. Thank you.
So, Mayor Paula, can we please see them as we vote for them?
Yep, please, can we put them up as we have a vote? We'll go for the amendment first. Tricky. Amendment, voting.
The amendment is lost. 5-4-7 against. Councillor Bunting, Mayor Southgate, Councillor O'Leary, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Donovan and Deputy Mayor Taylor are dissenting.
Okay, we'll now go to the motion.
The motion is carried, noting Councillor Bunting and Deputy Mayor Taylor are dissenting.
Mayor Paula, apologies. I had a brain fart and I pressed the wrong button.
Okay, should we reset, please, everyone?
Reset.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, I think about 8 people did that. Yeah.
Few changed their votes the second time round.
The motion is carried, 8-4, 4 against. Councillor Bunting, Councillor Donovan, Deputy Mayor Taylor and Councillor Wilson are dissenting.
Thank you, everyone. Shows an open mind. This is the 3rd time in the annual plan that a right of reply has been the little point that made a difference to me. Thank you, everyone. Julie, where are we now?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Paula. We just need clarification on one last thing before we have covered off all of the information that will allow us to do the financial modelling. And that was about the pit lane passing red. Did councillors want to bring that, bring a motion to the table for that?
I don't know. Was there any councillors that did?
There was a request for additional information, I think yesterday or the day before, and post that we were waiting to see if there was a motion that someone wanted to bring.
The additional information was supplied. Does anybody, Martin, this was something of importance to you. Do you have a motion or do we let it go?
Again, I mean, I think we've got to have the big discussion around commuter parking. I respect in that workshop we did. I don't necessarily think there's the will for this at the moment. I'm happy to put it up and test it if I had a seconder, but I suspect I won't. I think there's the passing red and commuter parking is a separate issue from, of course, the greening around Korea Pacifica, which of course I believe we desperately need. So I'm not. Dave,
well, I'm not raising the issue because staff have given me information to show that it's already under consideration, under planning elsewhere, and is not necessary whether you like the charging or the greening or whatever. That's all yet to come back to the infrastructure committee. I'm not even sure why it got in the report, knowing that now.
Yeah. Look, I'm also happy with that, and obviously in Councillor Angela's committee is ongoing work. I respect that.
Excellent. Okay. So we can now the staff will go away and just update the financial modelling. It will take them a little while to do that. In the interim, I was going to suggest there's a couple of other things that we could tick off. The first is Resolution H, which is just a noting resolution so that we can be really clear in our documentation of the annual plan process that we have not included any better off funding. I'll just share where that is for everyone. The resolution is on page 201 and the detail is on page 234. Thank you, Amy.
Oh dear, I have to keep putting my password in. Right, off we go. Is somebody speaking to this or?
Andrew's available to take questions if needed.
Okay, are there any questions, councillors, on this one? Can't get into the page right now. No, there being none. I just want to get the page open a minute, Hannah. Bear with. I seem to be timed out every few minutes. It's very frustrating. Okay. Oh no, it doesn't like me. Okay, is there a resolution on this?
Thank you. Amy's putting it up now.
Do we have a mover? Also move then.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Any debate on this? If not, let's go, and it's excluding something, so hopefully there isn't. Any debate? I don't want to debate it. Do you want to debate it, Sarah?
Makes sense.
All right, we'll go to the vote, everyone, please.
Councillor Dave, did I vote the right way? Because usually you instruct me how to vote.
No, I never instruct you how to vote. You're too unpredictable.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Julie, can we do, I know we're going to do all the financial ones in one go next Thursday, right? But could...
we could also do resolutions I and M. So I is the rates remission and postponement policy. The detail on
and
that
that's L,
is...
that's L. Isn't it?
Yes. Oh, is it? Sorry. L, sorry. Misread.
It's okay.
L.
So should we go to L, which is on page 235? Thank you. That's what I do without my glasses on, Julie, so you're good. Okay, who's going to talk to this one, please?
Tracy.
Hi, Tracy. Hi, thank you. So just, as per paragraph 57 of your report, just noting that we will just do a small policy consultation with the changes to this policy because of some amendments in the Act. We've got obviously the communication team helping with it. It is because we've only got 2 properties that are affected by this, it will be a bit more of a targeted consultation. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, I think Councillor Sarah.
Mayor Paula, I'd prefer that this was actually debated a lot. Oh, firstly, my question is this just signing off in terms of the Māori land aspect? If we wanted to look at anything like our rates remissions, would we need to do that now within this motion, or can we do that later when we look at the wider rates discussion?
You could bring it up as part of the wider rates discussion. This is specifically, I guess, this particular motion is specifically targeting the consultation based on this change. So as part of the rates discussion, you could bring up something additional and include it in a motion that you wanted to put forward, yes.
Okay, so it won't, just being very clear then, if supporting this now, I'm still able to bring up the rates remission discussion tomorrow, next week.
Sure, because if you read the actual recommendation, what this particular recommendation is doing right now is approving the consultation on the proposed changes. We could, change either one or the other, depending on what comes out.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that, Tracy.
If I can just add to that, Councillor Sarah, just if you were planning to do that, it'd be good to get it in advance so that we could do the work behind the scenes.
Thank you, David.
She's talking with my team.
I already am. I received an email which I've tried to read in a flurry, but
okay, apologies, I didn't know that.
So there's a little bit more work to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Any other questions on that? If not, let's move to the resolution. Okay. We've moved and seconded. We've had some questions. Or have we moved and seconded it? We haven't. I will move. Rob, do you want to second this one? Or anybody?
I believe Councillor Maxine raised your hand.
Okay, thank you. Any debate on this? Any debate? Okay, we'll go to the vote then, please. Okay.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Okay, so we can do the rates, the animal education and control fees and charges.
Yes, that's correct, ma'am. Paula, I've just sent the reference for those through, and Tracy will talk to those as well.
So thank you, councillors. I just, this particular one is just our fees and charges specifically at the moment just for our animal education and dog charges. The reason why we bring those through today earlier than the rest of the fees and charges is we do all the communication and brochures and setting ourselves up for dog licensee fees in April. So the meeting in May is too late for us to make a decision on these fees and charges. So you'll see you've got the list of what they are in attachment 2 in your diligent report. So again, happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. Just very briefly. So essentially, we're talking about 2 removals of roundings. That's the only difference. Is that right?
Basically, yes.
Yep. Okay. Won't get a scrap from me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. We'll go to Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, sorry for putting my hand up late. Why do our fees not take into account the inflation that we've talked about throughout this process? And I guess extending the question out further, will that be considered in all of the other fee chain? Will it be considered as part of the fee changes for all of the other fees that council charges when these come back to us?
Yes, and that's a great question. Thank you. So it is a combination of quite a few different things when each of the business units are reviewing their fees and charges. One of them is around definitely inflation. The other one, as you heard, and we've all discussed during the meeting on various other topics, is around market rates and making sure that we're still competitive, and simple things like rounding and just making it sort of easier for our customers. So it very much is a combination of both. So you will see in the full list that's quite a few pages long of all of our fees and charges that we have across council. There is a combination of all of those sorts of things happening. We also take the opportunity to review if the descriptions are correct, if we still need those fees and charges and all of those sorts of things. So the full report that you'll get in May has all of those.
So Tracy, is it fair to say that we've talked about 5%. We've got figures out in the marketplace from between 2 and about 8% being the expected inflation over 2022. Is it fair to say that we will see fees changing by those amounts?
Potentially, we will go back now after the discussions that we've had over the last few days and just relook at some of those. But like I say, a lot of them, to be fair, most of them are very much determined on market rates and still remaining competitive. If you think about some of the larger fees that we have that could get affected. So, but absolutely, we will go in and have it and do that piece of work again, just to review and make sure that we're still comfortable with what we'll be presenting.
Do you anticipate that we will lose a lot of the fees? And I'm thinking here of no longer requiring to get consent fees for 3-story buildings. Is our total fee income currently at risk because of central government changes or other factors?
Oh, that's a really good question. I actually can't answer that, but I will find out for you. So
Blair may
unless
be able to.
Blair's on the line to help with that. I know they did change and just move a couple of ups and downs because they did do quite a bit of work in that. So I'm not sure, Blair, if you can help with that, please.
Yeah, look, I can. Certainly for the annual plan year that we're talking about, Councillor Rob, there will be no direct impact on our district plan changes in terms of any fee structure, particularly because our likely proposed changes will need to go through the full consultation process. They won't take effect until sometime probably after this annual plan year is concluded that we're talking about.
So 3-storey buildings now still require a consent, do they? Until such times as we change them? Or I thought
Correct.
the government policy or the government change was on the day that they passed the legislation.
If we pass the legislation in its purest form, it takes effect. But obviously, as you know, and I won't go into the detail here in a public meeting, we are working through our response to that. And because our response will have taken to effect the qualifying matters, it then goes through the full consultation process. And so that decision won't come back till sometime, probably 12 months after we notify next year.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, Blair.
Thank you. Everyone's happy with that? Well, confidently understand that. Then we might go to the vote. Was it moved and go back to the recommendation, please? The resolution, I mean. Okay, thank you. Do we have a mover and a seconder, please?
I'm happy to move. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Deputy Mayor Taylor and Maxine.
Yep.
Right, thank you. Let's go to the vote. Okay, where have we landed? Looks like everyone. Dave?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. So Julie, that leaves us, we've done all the business except for the gritty to be longly debated financial stuff. And this would be a good pause for staff to do all of the calculations. In terms of the best preparation for next Thursday, if we can have that sooner rather than the night before or when we arrive, in some tangible form, it will help us kind of make our final decisions, because at this point in time we've been informing this final process period. So we've made decisions for the draft plan, but of course the biggest decision is how we deal with the financial decisions that we've made. Is that right?
Yes, Mayor Paula, and if that works, we can then make sure that we can, Tracy.
Can I just have 2 minutes, and I've just about got them there. I just need to just review them, and I can send through the graph now if you'd like to, Mayor Paula.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you want to see that before we finish today and take it off?
Paula,
1 o'clock.
Surely we were scheduled to carry on till 2:30. Surely we could, this is the last one, the last major one.
Yeah, I thought we weren't. I thought it got, so hang on a minute with me.
It's in our diary at 2:30.
Yeah, wait a minute. I do remember us having a debate and some people saying they weren't available or something. Where did we land on that, please? Are we going to 2:30?
Mayor Porter, from memory, it was that we were going to try and go as quickly as possible, but because noting Councillor Ryan can't be here today, he had to leave around 12. So my impression was that we would try and get some business done today, but try and finish as early as we could.
I just need to understand where we formally...
Could I point out that, in fact, in the diary it said 2:30 and my notes say 2:30.
I know.
More importantly, staff have then cancelled a whole series of meetings.
And I talked to staff,
afternoon.
Ewan. If you talk over me, I can't get the answer to your question, honestly. Staff, what did we agree? I did think we agreed to an earlier finish, but I may be wrong. Did we? Because I'm quite happy to go to 2:30. What was the decision made? Can someone clarify, please?
2:30.
We had all members on the phone, it was 2:30.
Thank you.
Right, so we'll continue to 2:30.
Thank you.
We will, thank you. We will go, it's 12 now. We'll probably
so-
go.
Mayor Porter, what does that mean in terms of the break?
Yeah, I was just about to say that too. It's really hard on Zoom because people preempt what you're going to say next, but it's 12 o'clock now. I wonder what would be we do need a break for lunch. What would be the convenient pause time? Would 1 o'clock work, or roughly if we aim at that, if we go for another hour?
I'm sorry, Mayor Paula, could we just ask Tracy just to confirm if she needs a short time now, and maybe suggest that we have an earlier break, and that allows her to be prepared for when we come back, and we can then also circulate that as soon as we can.
Sufficient time to have, because I know we want to get through, we want to keep time. Is this sufficient time if we come back at 12:45 from a staff perspective? No, from a staff perspective, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Paula. I can make that work. Thank you.
You can definitely make that work and get something to eat?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yeah, we'll make it happen.
All right, so we will be back at 1. Martin.
I've just intercepted. Just Councillor Leary says she has to leave at 1 o'clock. I don't think that's coming ideal. I mean, this is, I want to be as helpful as possible, but not to have 2 members down, even 1 member down is I'm just trying to work how we could.
Look, honestly,
I agree with that. Actually, here.
You, with respect, Your Worship, you would.
I'm not having the same argument that we had yesterday when we.
No, but you yourself would not contemplate being absent from this meeting, and in this case, all elected members are equal. So I'm just trying to be cooperative and helpful, whether we carry on until 1 o'clock to have a 10-minute break now. And at the point at which Angela Leary has to leave, we're 1 down already, which is absolutely not ideal. So I'm just kind of suggesting we carry on till 1.
I think we're 3 down now, actually.
As well.
Yeah, it's 3 down.
All right, let's take a 5-minute stretch. Let Tracy, and then we'll carry it on to 1. But I hope, councillors, I do have to say this puts staff under incredible stress when we're trying to cater to 13 diaries and 13 people's private appointments and other things.
Totally
it's really hard, really hard. We're doing our best.
So we're on a 5-minute break now?
Yeah,
5-minute
just
break.
before you go, Paula, just noting that Ryan was bringing up something to do with depreciation. I'm not sure whether anyone else is, Rob or anyone else is ready to do that. It's been in that conversation.
Yeah, can I just add, Mayor Paula, that I think items I through to K, we will not finish within an hour or 45 minutes, and they are all interrelated. So I'm just of a mind, and if we have to go back and look at previous decisions, we may find that we get partway through those 3 particular clauses, and we may have to go back and look at some past decisions. We might be better to do all of those 3 and all the alternatives in 1 sitting, rather than know that in 45 minutes or an hour, we're going to have to close it down.
I hear you, but I hear contradicting views from council too. So given that I'll compromise, we'll have a 5-minute break and we'll go to 1 o'clock. And I don't really want to talk about diary again because it can't be solved. So we've got that flow over time for Thursday. Let's get some information in front of us and go to 1 o'clock. And then we will adjourn until Thursday, and we will finalise our business. That is how I am going on that.
Sounds like the way to go.
All right, have a break.
Okay, see you in 5.
Somebody thought to cheer me up. Look at this. I'll share if you were here. Oh,
what is it?
Dark chocolate with almonds and sea salt. Oh,
Sounds lovely. Cream
sounds good,
sells it.
doesn't it? Huh?
I think cream sells it. It's very, very good.
Oh, okay. Oh, excited about that then. Because yesterday, towards the end of the afternoon, I really, 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 really wanted chocolate so much. Anyway, I didn't have any. Let's go. Let's. Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, so Amy is just bringing up the graphs now. So after the last few days, this is our position of where we're at to roll into the draft budget. So our debt to revenue, you'll see was from a long-term plan perspective, we were aiming to be at 238. That's now dropped down to the 219%. Net debt has also dropped from 876 to 804. So remember, that's a combination of our opening balances and our favourability coming through from last year, and some of the deferrals that we talked about a couple of days ago. The main one, obviously, that we really want to talk about is balancing the books. So you'll see there we're currently at negative $12 million compared to negative $2 million deficit that we had in the original long-term plan. The other change you'll see is years 2 or 3 and 4. So we were hoping to be back by $5 million in the long-term plan and positive. That second year or third year rather for the long-term plan is now at that negative $10 million. So what I just thought I'd just quickly do, just to make it really clear to everyone how we got from the -2 to the -12, is we just did a little reconciliation behind the scenes, which I'll just share with you now. Amy will just bring that one up.
Tracy, you'll be sending this to us?
Yes. Okay, so what we've just done here for you is just we're starting at the negative $2 million in deficit from the long-term plan perspective. So I just wanted to remind elected members aware of the conversations that we've been having around depreciation, and we've got interest in those sorts of things. So I will just really clearly again remind elected members that there are 3 things that will change between us doing this draft and when I get into producing the final budget in May. One of them is potential rates revenue. So what my team does between now and the end of the year is has a look around and determines if we can rate any more households, and obviously that's additional revenue coming in for us. So at the moment we have a certain percentage of what we think that will be in growth, which we've locked and loaded into the plan. But obviously we like to get as much as we can and anticipate what that will be. So that number also has potential to come about and be different, higher hopefully. What you're seeing and what's in behind the scenes is the additional rating that we got from last year. So obviously that has a cumulative effect from year to year. The other thing that we look at is obviously interest. So again, that's very much dependent on what our debt is determined from the modelling and things that we've done today. But what we also do is just triple check what our interest percentages and rates will be at that particular time. So again, trying to be as accurate as we possibly can, closer to the final date. The third thing that I've already talked about really earlier on, I think it was day 2 of these, meetings was we are at the moment doing 7 revaluations of our asset classes. So again, there is potential for movement in that depreciation line depending on what comes out of those revaluations. The largest chunk of that depreciation number at the moment is because of the building revaluation that we did at the end of June last year. And you'll know, and you'll heard me talk about in Finance Committee, that is quite different to what we had anticipated. And as part of the long-term plan, you're seeing those effects in this year's actuals. We also obviously have to pick that up and include that in the annual plan and for the following years. So that gets us through to the changes that we put up from council meetings, council resolutions, and those contract changes that we presented, which includes the likes of electricity and cybersecurity and things like that. We then get to -7, if you like, from a deficit perspective, overlaying that with our operating inflation that we did, and then all of the proposals that you've just been through in the last few days gets you to an adjusted balancing the books of $12.5 million. So hopefully that's helpful to you, and I see there's some hands raised, so there's lots of questions.
Okay, can I go? Oh, do you want to keep this up and I'll just, or do you want me to? Yeah, thank you. And let me just see who was first. Sorry, apologies. Hang on a second. Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thanks, Mayor Paula. Tracy, can you? I'm sorry. I just, if you could just slow down a little bit of it. The balance in the books year. Can you just take me through that again? We were going to balance the books. Are we still going to balance the books in the same year, or are we going out 1 year?
No, we're going out 1 year.
From which year to which year? Just clarify.
So we were supposed to be balancing our books in year 3 of our long-term plan, so not next year, 2023, 24.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And now it's 24, 25.
Yes.
Thanks.
Councillor O'Leary.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Paula. Thanks, Tracy. So just so I'm 100% clear, so we started at a $7 million deficit through all the contract impacts, COVID and all of that stuff. Then the biggest decision was adding on the $5 million for inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of the EM and staff discussions that we spent the majority of our time on had an impact of only 500,000.
Correct.
And that's got us to the 12, what was it, 12.5?
12.5 million, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor McPherson. Mute.
Thanks, Tracy. You mentioned the words the cumulative effect from year to year.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cumulative effect that I'm wondering about going back a year. There was a last minute decision to reduce the proposed rate by 1% from memory. What's the cumulative effect on this year of that? It's more than just the 1%, is it not? So sort of compounds, is it? But I'm not sure. I'd like to know the effect of that as well.
Yeah, I think if I remember rightly back to then, I think it was a $1.7 million per year. So that was at the time what we took out, if I remember, but I can find out that information for you. But off the top of my head, it was a 1.7. So obviously that then adds on to each year after that. So
would it not say?
Yes, it does. So that was 1 year's worth, and then it would compound. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'd add 4% of 1.7 onto the 1.7.
Correct.
But,
yeah.
So
that's
enlarging a bit each year. Okay, thank
that's
you.
Right.
Thanks. Yep.
Any further questions? Oh, Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Tracy, for the updated graphs. Just looking at balancing the books, and you look across as you explained to the Deputy Mayor that it would be another year before we balance the books. It follows on, doesn't it, that in each of the following years, the surpluses that we have will be significantly less, or will be, I won't use the word significant, but will be less than what we currently have in the long-term plan.
Correct. So what the graph that I've shown you, so all the blue ones are what we had in the original LTP. And so you can see the effects of that by the green obviously being a lot less.
And does that mean then that we won't be retiring, assuming we have those surpluses in 25 onwards, does that mean that we will have less surplus to repay debt?
Surprisingly or not, no, it actually ends up being very similar. So if you've got the graphs in front of you, I'm not sure, Amy, if you want to show it, is the net debt graph. And what that does is actually puts us just about back into what we had in the original LTP anyway, as at the current state today. And as I mentioned, that's very much because of the cumulative effect of additional cash that we came through from last year. And obviously just the timing of what some of the changes that we've made today. So you'll see there it actually ends up being very similar to what we had in the long-term plan.
So it has absolutely no effect on our ability to deliver the capital program?
No.
Okay, we must have had a big surplus then. If you add up those differences from 25 onwards, in one year it's 18 million. In another year, it's 15 million. In another year, it's 16 million, less that we have to repay debt. I just don't quite see how we can have those reductions and still deliver our capital plan in the 10 years and end up with roughly the same net debt. The arithmetic doesn't make sense to me.
So if you look at
I'll take it offline.
Yeah, definitely. But if you just look at 20 and 21 and 2021, 22 and 23, you'll see the effects of, because you've got lower debt in those 3 years, that then starts becoming compounding, and when those deficits from the balancing the books, and you can see it flicking over from that point there. So 2024, which is then picking up the deficit from the 2023 year, you can see that's where the graph starts coming back in and being a lot closer to what the LTP was. So basically, you've kind of got to add up the favorability of 21, 22 and 23 and then offset that with some of those deficits coming through. And remember, the other thing is obviously we also have a larger deferral amount sitting in the background from a modelling perspective than what we also had modelled for the LTP. So and that's cash and just timing of cash. So that also does make a difference when we're looking at these sorts of things as well.
So that deferral then means it's a permanent deferral, is it?
Essentially, it's just the way. It's easier for me to do it that way because it makes it simpler. So I just pull it out. So yeah.
So the 90 million that we've got as the deferral for this year presumably remains at 90 million right through the whole of the 10-year plan, and that obviously offsets the differences between the balancing the books surpluses. Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
I see that now. Thank you.
Thank you. What Rob, help me out with that. Does it make a appreciable difference?
Well, it just means that probably we're not delivering the long-term plan, the CapEx program that we promised, because that 90 million, and I'm just using that as a known example, that 90 million never ever.
Okay.
Well, the 90 million remains deferred right through the whole 10-year plan. So in some ways we don't deliver the total CapEx program that we promised in the long-term plan.
I need that.
So just to be clear, if I can just reiterate, there is a big difference between what we cash flow model for the capital program and what gets delivered. So you've heard Chris say quite a few times that they've never not delivered an actual capital project. It's just the timing of when we pay the cash out to match those projects. And that's the hard bit for us, obviously, behind the scenes, to match the cash flow of those projects, which is technically the deferrals, and the final deliverability of producing those assets. So that's why we do, and that's why it's quite a different thing to remember.
So theoretically, they get picked up in year 11 if they ever do.
And that's why when I pull it out at the beginning, because it's basically I pull it out, put it back in, pull it out, put it back in. So it's just easier to pull the whole lot right at the front.
it gets pulled out, gets put into year 11, which means we don't trust trying to, honestly, I'm not an accountant, so I'm just trying to get
Just helping Tracy. Just adding to Tracy's comment, it's absolutely right. We're not delivering the capital program in the 10 years like we said we would. So let's just be clear on that. But we will have started all projects, but they will just complete in that, and probably in that 11th year, like Tracy just finished up with. Yeah.
So in that respect, sorry, go Rob.
No, you go. If you're still on that, I've got a separate question, different.
So in that respect, come year 11, because I think we then have to look at a new 10 years of 10-year plan, or the 3-year rolling 10-year plan that we have. Either it's not done or it doesn't get done entirely, or we create a bow wave of cost further forward, don't we? If these are critical pieces of work that have to be done, and we come to year 11, then we've either got to use one of our financial levers, rates, fees, I don't know, something
well,
to get.
Chris may be able to add to this, but I mean, fundamentally, every 3 years we do the long-term plan. We always prioritise based on the needs of elected members, and so there's not a bow wave. I think the other piece I'd like to refer back to is what I talked about earlier about the asset management plans and the maturity of council's understanding of our renewals program, which means that we have a greater focus and visibility of what needs to get done. But Chris, you might want to add.
Thank you. I think that's kind of helpful. Except you're saying that you prioritise as per the governor's or the councillor's priorities and wishes. As we're just doing now today, of course. But if it's critical infrastructure, given that, say, for example, we've got $200 million worth of stormwater deficit in year 11 as it is, do we compound the problem? Do we compound the problem if it's critical infrastructure and we don't do it now, and we defer it, and we defer it again, and we defer it again, and we get to year 11 and there's some deferred work? Don't we create a problem for ourselves in year 11, or how does it rely on the political whim to drop that project or to favour it at that point in time? How do we keep an eye, David, on what we really must do? Because I know there's some staggering pressures coming on us in infrastructure, and I'm just really concerned about how we keep the eye on that. So I'm not trying to be all cute.
No, not at all. Chris is always reporting back through the capital monitoring report at the Finance Committee, the reforecasting of the movements of capital programs. Let's just be clear that what we're talking about is something that we said we'd complete in year 10 would be completed in year 11 if that deferral was to be completed then. So sometimes that can be only a matter of 3 months because it just goes over the fiscal barrier, if you like, to the 11th year. So no question about the optics in terms of deferrals do mean that when we said we'd finish all of our programs in the 10-year period, we won't. And don't forget, in the capital portfolio monitoring report, there's a number of reasons why we defer, and sometimes it's a good decision to do because we have new information. Sometimes it's based on supplier shortages and not being able to complete a project, etc. So I know deferrals get talked about as in a bad sense sometimes, but I think there are sometimes some good reasons why to defer, as long as we're keeping the community informed and we're making the best decisions that are in the best interest of the community. I'm not sure if Chris is on board, but I'm sure he would agree with everything I said.
Okay.
Your Worship, I have a question just on that matter.
Hang on 1 second, not trying to cut you off. We'll come to that. Either the questions of Rob or Dave that sit in the queue before you, are they on the same matter or there's some different matters?
My next question, Mayor Paula, is different, so I'm happy to let any other elected members who want to talk on this particular topic go ahead of me.
Yeah,
and Dave?
well, mine's on depreciation, and I'm always happy to let Ewan go first.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
I think we've just seen the first example of Dave Mack being gentle. My question is, does staff have on file, or could they get on file from Audit New Zealand a letter just confirming that what we're currently doing is best practice? And could staff collate maybe the other metro cities on how they manage this, and if they do manage it the same way? The reason is deferrals, I think, has become institutionalized, and it's a tool we use. And I think, with all due respect, David, your suggestion that, this is something that could have happened in year 10 and we slide it by 3 months and it's year 11. I want to get better optics as to the accumulative effect of all of these deferrals from year 1 through the entire 10-year period. So maybe that's the third thing. If you could do an analysis, I guess, of maybe the last 10 years of all of these deferrals and how we've managed that bow wave. So there are 3 points. Auditor office just confirming this is best practice, analysis of the other 4 major metros as to how they manage it, and then an analysis of deferrals over the last 10 years, just to confirm your analysis that, in fact, there isn't this bow wave, and yes, it's always in year 10 that we just pop the little bit over into year 11.
We'll take that as a staff action and come back.
Thank you.
Councillor Pascoe?
Yeah, my second question, which is unrelated to what we've been discussing, relates, Tracy, to paragraph 45, where you've given us a formula for how we might consider a rates adjustment in order to rebalance the books. And so does that formula still remain? Is that still valid? Sorry, that formula of $2.2 million equals 1% rate change?
Yes.
Right. So we could, as a matter of decision, decide to bring back the balancing the books deficit from 12.5 million back to 2 by considering a rate increase to cover that extra expenditure that is now in our which is now projected in our budget for 22-23.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And no doubt you could do that for us if we requested.
Yes, we could.
Thank you. Those are my questions at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson?
Thanks, Mayor Paula. Tracy and or David, the issue of depreciation, I'm not sure whether these are going to be the same questions that Ryan might have asked, though at least one area. The LTP proposed a certain amount of depreciation, cash amount. I understand, if I've read the email trail correctly, that what's now being proposed by staff is 6 million extra. Correct me if that's wrong, because I've just been scanning them. What does that do to the balancing the books and to the graphs that you've talked about? I mean, if we, what extra, where does that show up as extra in those figures? Either that table list that you gave or the graphs.
So in the table, it's in that it's one of the very first numbers that we talk about. So the depreciation alone is about $5.5 million in addition to the long-term plan. The bulk of that is due to the building revaluation that we got done at the end of last year in June. The rest of it is our assumptions right now, based on 7 revaluations of asset classes that we are currently in the middle of completing. So it's our best guess, I guess, if you like, for what I think that depreciation number will be. And when we come back in May with the final budget, those revaluations will be completed. You will still have the building revaluation because obviously that has a cumulative effect now.
Yeah, so what effect does that have on the bottom line and or the top line and the gross?
So it added
5.5 million.
Yeah, so it's 5.5 million. However, that's offset by a savings that we've made in interest and the additional rates revenue. So essentially, those three net each other off.
Okay. Just in terms of the timing of the depreciation or the revaluation and that, are we not going to always be in the position of having to change at the end of year one, an LTP one? I mean, why don't we keep the LTP calculations for 3 years and use the new revaluations for the following LTP? Wouldn't that, in terms of, doesn't that add a complexity to the way we do things by having such a major sort of change in that area after the event?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Unfortunately, from an accounting standards perspective, no. So one of the things that we have to do each year is revalue and relook at the value of our assets. We also obviously impair them and look at those sorts of things.
Did you say every year? Sorry to interrupt.
Every year. Every year I have to relook at it every year. So normally we do the big revaluations every 3 years. So we do waters now. We won't need to do them every 3 years for another 3 years. Ever since I've been in this role, we've had to do buildings and land every single year because the percentage of increase that obviously, as you know, with the values in the city, increases by more than 10% every year. So I have to do a pre-calculation in December to determine what that will look like. And it's meant that every single year we've had to do a building and land revaluation.
Okay. God, the life of an accountant. The other related question, which I think Ryan might have been touching on, the depreciation relating to the Three Waters assets. If you sequestered that out to the side, what sort of proportion of our total valuation is that, and how much, or of our total depreciation allowance?
So there are over a third of our assets obviously as water. So we are just doing that piece of work for Councillor Ryan and behind the scenes. I don't have the answers to that today, I'm sorry. So
if we handed it over to the whole of the Three Waters assets to whether it's entity B or entity Z or whoever, do we hand over the depreciation allowance? Do we literally hand them cash, or how does that sort of, I'm thinking, because that may happen in the year 12 months ahead.
Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. So unless Stephen or Andrew's
I can help
call.
high level. Let me have a go high level, give Stephen time. So Councillor Dave, it depends on the amount of money that central government will pay us for our water assets. So we have a net book value, which is what we track when we depreciate over time the assets. So let's just say our water assets are worth $100. If they gave us $100, then everything would be square. But if they only gave us $50, obviously we would have a loss to our books. So that whole conversation with central government about what the value of our water assets is critical. And I will say, on top of this, when we're isolating, if we're looking to take a picture, and I know Councillor Ryan has asked Stephen Halliwell, who's doing the finance work on the Three Waters, it's kind of like not only the water assets, but it's all costs associated with water that HCC has. And so Stephen's gripping that up.
Yeah, so that's where I'm coming from. So does that include the depreciation? Because we've rated for a certain amount of depreciation cover for that those Three Waters assets.
And it will, yep.
So we would be not just handing them the poo plant, we'd be handing them the depreciation of the poo plant, the value of that as well somehow.
Yeah, if you think about it as we'd be handing them an asset that has a total cost, and we just it's up for them to then depreciate that in their books from then on.
But they would either pay us less because it wasn't 100% value anymore, or they'd expect us to fork over what we've got from the ratepayers towards that difference.
Yeah, and it'll be less than the original cost because we would have started depreciating. So if we take the original cost less what we've depreciated, and let's just say that's $50, and they pay us $50, we'd hand that $50 to them, and then they would have that on their books, and then per accounting rules, they would have to depreciate from there, and there'd be no cost to HCC.
So then there'd be no net effect, one hopes.
Yes, if they paid our net book value, which is really the original cost less depreciation, then there'd be no impact on HCC.
Okay, so that's a story for another few months down the track, I guess.
Absolutely. And there's other bits to that story, as you know, in terms of the quality of the asset being handed over.
Yep. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Sorry, just took a while to unmute. Yeah, look, thanks, Paula. Look, I feel like it's going to just take me a little while to get my head around some of these figures here. So without, obviously I don't want to give staff more work, but I would be certainly interested in what sort of rate rise would be needed to ensure that we balance the books in 23, 24. How would that equate to rates, to a rate rise this year? So I'd be interested in that. Also, I'm finding these headings that we've got on what you sent out in terms of changes due to council resolutions 2 million, revised draft annual plan 7 million, etc., etc. It would be really useful for me just to have a broad idea of what was under those headings, what particular spending items went into that. Not every single one of them, but just to give me an idea of some of the bigger ones that we made and where they fit into that.
We can do that. We do have a list of the resolutions that you've passed, and we can circulate that as well for you.
Well, that'd be good, and how they fit into those categories.
Yes,
it would be wonderful. Thank you. And lastly, I suppose I've got a question which is probably directing to you, Paula, and that is, at the moment, our resolutions are framed in a way that these costs are done for the purposes of the annual plan and forecasting, etc. I'm presuming there may be an opportunity to revisit things in that case and redebate them.
Julie, can you explain how we do that? Yeah, Sean, thank you, Sean.
Yeah, I might be able to help. So just in terms of the decisions that are to be made, so we've said sort of the whole way through that it's basically you've made primarily spending decisions through the course of this annual plan meeting to date. I guess the financial strategy impacts of those decisions are what's been reflected. So they are just noting motions or recommendations. If you want to change so the balancing the books, the debt to revenue, the net debt, they are simply the consequence of decisions that you make. So if you want to change the balancing the books or the debt to revenue, you've essentially got two. One is to look at the revenue side of things. So primarily the rates resolution. At the moment, the recommendation is to simply note that it's remaining at the 4.9%, which is in the LTP. You can change that. So that would be a decision that you could consider, is to change the amount of rates. Or you could look to change some of the decisions you've made to the meeting up to this point on the spending side of things. And so I think that's where it's helpful to look at what Tracy has laid out in terms of what the makeup of those decisions is and the impact they might have on balancing the books. And I think that's probably the crux of it. So there's kind of two active decisions still to be made. It's confirming the spending decisions to date and confirming the rates increase.
And maybe I can just add to that, Sean. The process that we're following is, this is your point to have a look at the draft budget, considering your decisions. And in May, when Tracy comes back, that will be the final budget. So again, you'll have a chance, if you want to alter things, you do have the chance to do it at that point as well. The reason we do the 2 bite at the cherry is that for this one, it allows you to consider the impact of your decisions and assess if anything is significant and how you want to engage with the community on that conversation.
And then your final answer to Jeff, Councillor Jeff, if I may, which is to Councillor Rob's earlier point. If you wanted to take and put the balancing the books back to the original long-term plan, which was $2 million in deficit, it would mean a total rates increase of 9.5%. So we already have 4.4 backed in there. 4.9. So we're increasing an additional 4.6% rates increase on top of what we've already got in there.
Good work. That was quick. Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, well, thank you. And you're right, we've got some levers to pull, but excuse me, Jeff, it answers your question. We've got some latitude before the ink is dry on the paper. But we've only got a limited number of levers to pull. So Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, look, thank you. Councillor Jeff, or Deputy Mayor Jeff's question, well, actually Tracy answered the questions I had. I had at the back of the envelope thought we'd landed on 4.9, that was baked in, and then roughly it is 1% for each 2 million we're trying to capture, right, for rates. So if we have a deficit of 10 million that we're trying to catch up, it would be roughly 5%, or as you've said, 4.6.
Great.
So that's the easy back of the envelope we can always use. If we need 2 million, it's 1% in rates. Is that right? Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor Paula, and thanks, Tracy, for your helpful explanations. I've just got, in terms of depreciation and revaluations, a couple of questions. Could you explain to me, I guess, in layman's terms, so what is included in a valuation? Because I guess one of my questions is, if we're looking at, presumably depreciation is to cover, the maintenance and renewal side of things, and but if valuation's being driven up by land values, like what relationship does it actually have with, needing to paying for maintenance?
Sure. So actually, while we do revalue the land every year, land doesn't actually have depreciation. I'll just mention that one.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, but really good question. So what we're trying to do with depreciation is obviously, when we're valuing our assets, is just to get the most accurate picture of what our assets are worth as at that point in time. So for buildings, it's a little bit easier because a lot of that is driven by market value. And as you know, the prices in the city for the last few years have just increased year after year after year. We own a large amount of buildings in the city, so obviously the value of our buildings to us has increased quite substantially. So that's the buildings one, and that's why that one has increased quite a lot. And when you're going to things like the water plants or water assets and things like that, again, what the asset team is doing is just reviewing what we've got. Is that still correct? Is that still appropriate? And is the useful life, i.e. when do we think we need to renew it or replace it? Again, is that still appropriate? You've heard the term over the last few days about sweating the assets. So again, can we extend the life of that asset and not replace it and when we thought we could? Or the opposite, actually, it looks like, a particular building or a particular asset isn't going to last as long as we thought it would. So we obviously accelerate the depreciation on that to time that within. Essentially what you're saying is additional money to then maintain it or replace it in the capital program.
I can just add to that, Councillor Sarah, sorry Tracy, is that it's very important for elected members to understand the difference between depreciation and maintenance. Depreciation is using up the asset over the life of that asset, whereas when we talk about maintenance, we're talking about fixing stuff up along the way. So painting, new carpets, all the rest of it. Those are done through the asset management plans and staff budget for that maintenance based on the condition assessments that we have. And then it's not every year we have to do certain things like that. So that's why the asset team are very good at understanding the condition of the assets and what we need to do to keep them in good order.
Okay. I think so. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Happy to talk
I might pull you
offline.
offline. Thanks.
Councillor Pascoe?
Yeah, thank you. Just a further question. Having sort of established that a 9.4 or 5% rate increase would bring our balancing the books back to the LTP figure, does that, and it may be a question for Julie, does that trigger what Tompkins Wake call a special consultative procedure that we would need to undertake with our residents if that was in fact the decision of council?
Councillor Pascoe, a couple of things, and I'm sure Sean will jump in here if he needs to. First of all, if you want to increase rates, you do need to have that conversation with your community, most likely, and the special consultative procedure is just a structure for a consultation that requires a couple of extra rules, which we would always apply in this case. One is it has to run for at least a month, and the second is, most importantly, when you go out to the community and ask them, you need to put options in front of the community. So you can't just, for example, go out and ask, should we increase our rates? You need to say, should we increase our rates or should we do something else? So that's the core thing about a special consultative procedure process. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
So your comments in the last 3 or 4 days about how you would progress this annual plan, irrespective of a rate increase, is really no different to how it might go if a rate increase was the decision of council.
In the report, we have recommended what we call an engagement approach rather than a formal consultation. And the reason we've done that is we think the conversation that the key critical drivers for you at the moment and making some of these movements are decisions that around the inflation are things that you don't have a lot of option about. And so for them, it's mostly more appropriate to explain that to the community in a really good conversation through an engagement campaign, rather than ask them a question, we have inflation, do you want us, the only question you could ask is, we have inflation, do you want us to either manage that through moving out our balancing the books position or for a rates increase? It is entirely council's decision if you do want to consult and ask that question.
Okay, and the balancing the books reconciliation that Tracy's provided us with this morning would be a good start, wouldn't it, in terms of that consultation procedure and explaining why we've landed where we've landed after sort of 9 months after a sign off of a long-term plan.
Yes, so if you go out and have the conversation with the community about this is where we are, and you don't want to ask them about a rates increase, you could just do an informing campaign, so an engaging campaign, and we wouldn't be asking for specific feedback to a survey or anything. We'd just be educating the community about what the position we're in and why that has occurred. If you wanted to actually ask about a rates increase, then you'd ask them a question with those two options of how you're dealing with those inflationary pressures, which would either be balancing the books or increasing rates.
Okay, thank you. I don't see Sean's muting off, so he probably is quite happy with your explanation. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you. Julie, just one further question follow on from Rob. So if we do that engagement and we get the public to understand what we're debating, and then in that final council meeting when we move to adopt the plan, because presume people can come to public forum and do whatever's usual.
Yes, definitely. We could create opportunities for the community to give you feedback. Just to be really, really clear, the one thing you wouldn't be able, what we wouldn't recommend you do in that final May meeting is to make a decision to increase rates without having that consultation.
Right, cool. Is everybody happy with that? Okay, so where are we at now with what's next on this?
Mayor Paula, I've made a list of the information that elected members that asked us to bring back. So could I just maybe quickly run through that just to confirm that so we're really clear?
Yep.
Councillor Wilson, you asked for us to ask Audit New Zealand to confirm the best practice for the use of deferrals. You have asked us what is the practice of other metros in terms of using deferrals, and we'll assume that will just be Tauranga, Christchurch, Auckland and us. You've asked us to give us analysis of our deferral movements over the last 10 years, so how much we have deferred in and out every year for the last 10 years. Councillor Pascoe, you asked about what would be the rate increase to bring it back to the 2 million, which Tracy's answered, but we can put that in writing. And Deputy Mayor Taylor, you also asked a similar question, but you asked what would it need to be to bring us back to a bouncing the books position in 23-24. So we'll just confirm that that is the same answer. Deputy Mayor Taylor, you also asked for a list, the breakdown of the table that we showed today, so you can see which of each of the resolutions have fallen into each of those categories, so you can understand that. And Councillor McPherson, I'd like to clarify, do you need any information brought back to you around the depreciation being assigned to the water assets, or have we answered your questions?
For the purpose of this discussion, you've answered it all. I think we'd like to know the amount, I think, or Ryan was anyway, but I don't think it makes much difference at this particular point. Thanks.
So Ryan has sent an email behind the scenes with his questions, which I assume will bring out into open discussion when he's back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and we can share those. We can share the response to Ryan's email with this information as well.
I mean, obviously chairing, I haven't had the chance to fully digest it myself. Let's see who else has questions, because we're going to finish in about 5 minutes. Just round up of what you need to know to put you in the best position to make the right decisions on next Thursday. Sarah.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Paula. I'm not sure if I need to flag it now because I'm already, I think Tracy's team's already started to help me get some information, but it was just around the rates rebate scheme that we have, and I'm keen to understand what the kind of criteria is at the moment. I guess I can go back and look at it, but just very laid out very simply, and what might be potential impacts if you were to shift or change that criteria to, say, include a more residents in the lower income bracket. So it's just, but I can probably work with Tracy's team in the meantime to ask some questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think it's good for everyone to have their questions answered in a way that we can all see. So whatever questions you do put forward, the information's got to come out widely so we can all see.
Yes, I've captured that, so we'll bring that back as well.
Councillor Maxine?
Thank you. The only other thing that puzzles me on the breakdown that Tracy's provided us from the opening position of our balancing the books to the potential closing at 12.5 is the zero under the depreciation after revaluations, etc. And there doesn't seem to be any kind of plus minus in there. So a bit of clarity about what the bigger levers are in there would be helpful. You have talked about it, thank you, Tracy, but having an understanding about those numbers behind there would be helpful too.
So sorry, just to clarify, Councillor Maxine, there are 3 numbers. One of them is the interest cost, one of them is depreciation, and then the third one is the rates revenue. The reason why those numbers aren't included is because those are the 3 numbers that have potential to change, obviously between now and May. So yeah, that's the reason why I just that I've done it like I've done it.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further concerns, questions, items for clarity that we need to be able to do the job we need to do on Thursday? No. Yes, Jeff.
Actually, no, I actually just want to make a comment thanking staff. I mean, bloody hell. It's been a long 5 days and we're asking for a lot more help. So really appreciate it because it's a big ask, I know. So thank you, Lance and the team.
So what he's saying is it appreciates you giving us the shirt off his back.
Mayor Paula, could I ask something that would be really helpful for staff? If
Yes,
any
please.
elected members have any motions that they would like to put up in relation to the motions that we'll be discussing on Thursday, if we could have those well in advance, it would just help us make sure that we understand them well and can be prepared to answer any questions that you've got on the day as well.
Yeah, and Sean, you can open that next meeting with the key points that you wanted to raise if they haven't been raised that you sent me earlier today. That'd be okay.
Absolutely.
I think
yep.
we're all, yeah. So councillors, we're done here, but I want to thank you for the robust debate. I don't think any member of the Hamilton community can say we don't turn over every stone and look at everything superbly carefully. I think we've definitely done that. So, okay, we're off until next Thursday on this topic. So go forth and enjoy what you've got to do next and catch up with you soon. If there's any issues you want to raise with me personally, please feel free to do so.
Thanks, Paula.
All right.
Thank you,
Bye.
Paula.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.